What's good? What's good, my people? ¿Cómo estamos, mi gente? It's time. Cafecito. Shout out to everybody on Facebook. Shout out to everybody on YouTube. Hello. Oh my God. How you be? 6 p.m. Yes. What's good? Please like and subscribe. What's good, everybody? Hola, mi gente. Well, what's good? What's good? Oh. What's good, mi gente? How y'all be? That's it. No more song. Listen. How's everybody doing? Armando, what's good with you? Miss Divine Brown, what's good with you? Chilling over here. Still getting this little studio set up here in my house. But it's probably a little bit too much light, which is fine. At least you guys can hear me. The most important thing, though, is really audio. So I'm going to bring on John right now. Okay, we're going to discuss all this topic, which is a hot topic right now during the Rona lockdown. And a lot of people want to know what's going on with my credit. How can I increase it? What is it that I got to do? So because we get a lot of customers who are in that same situation, we like to talk about these things because it's going to be the best for all of us to have an understanding of how it works, how it is that you can increase your credit scores to get a mortgage, to get a vehicle, to get credit cards, so you could do it yourself. We're going to talk about that today. I know a lot of you are my customers. Shout out to you. Don't worry about it. You are in the process. You are going to get results, like I say all the time. Just be patient with us. A lot of you started, and the reason why I'm saying this is because a lot of you are starting the process. So when you get more business, there are going to be some customers that are going to be like, oh, when are you going to give results? When are you going to do this? When you do that? You're in the process. Anyways, let's call up John. John is in Philadelphia. You got to let me hear if you guys can hear me. Okay, if you can hear John.
Hello.
John.
Yes.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. Over here, my people. Can y'all hear John? Let me know if you can hear John. John, say what's good.
Test.
I'm going to get you a microphone one of these days, John.
One of these days.
We start doing more credit repairs, and we're going to be full HD. It's going to be soon because there's a lot of people starting the process. So definitely appreciate you guys. We are getting new equipment here because of you. We want to entertain you and educate you at the same time. So if you guys can hear John, please let me know. We hear John. Okay, John. All right, John. So the question today is, like we get all the time, how can I increase my credit scores to get a mortgage, to get a vehicle, to get credit cards? You know, that's a question that a lot of people have because they all come with different things that they want to increase. They have different goals, what they want to do. And John thought about this and said, you know what, this is a perfect topic to talk about right now, especially during the lockdown and what's going on. So I said to John, all right, cool. We'll start it off and then we'll take it from there. If you guys have any questions, please put them in the comment box on Facebook and on YouTube. We'll get back to you. Again, a lot of people who don't know us, I go by GizzyCredit. This is John. We do credit repair. We have helped over 10,000 customers. We have a $99 do-it-yourself credit repair system, $99 credit card funding system. We've been doing credit repair for a long time, and John is an expert in finance, real estate, and we have these podcasts to educate you guys on the process of whatever it is you're trying to do. On top of that, make you guys feel more comfortable with doing business with us because you see us online. We're not going to shy away from any question that you have. And of course, we're going to answer any question without any doubt about your credit. Go ahead, John.
So, I think the reason where the topic came from was because we're constantly having people reach out with the objective of saying, I want to get to a 700, I need to get to a 720, I need to get 680, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, my natural answer in most cases is, listen, the score is a lagging indicator of the report, right? The report leads the score. And that's actually the absolute truth. It's just in certain financing situations, the score is the qualifier. For instance, a mortgage, right? With FHA. FHA is a situation, which we've talked about in a lot of our previous podcasts where, assuming you're dealing with a direct lender, that minimum FICO, which is middle score of your 3, is 620. Some people come in with, 590, 580, and they're just trying to squeeze an extra 15 or 20 points up, and they're picking and choosing in the report where exactly they're missing or what one account they may need to get off to bump it up, and the mortgage guy's doing the same thing, and they're driving themselves nuts. The problem is that, and it's not necessarily a problem, but what we typically do when we look at these reports is, the one thing that you can control as a consumer is your unsecured credit ratios, right? And we've talked about this at length in previous podcasts, but it holds true. Now, it typically represents from 0% usage up to 100% usage. Now, unsecured credit ratio meaning
is the credit cards.
Unsecured credit ratio means your total cumulative credit card usage against your total cumulative credit card balances. So, limits. So your limit against your usage, right? The ratio, the ensuing ratio. So, for instance, if you have a $10,000 in limits, meaning all the cards combined, and you have $1,000 in usage, that's 10% usage, right? So from 0% usage all the way up to 100% usage, that typically on a normal size file will basically encompass anywhere from 35 to 40 points. So for instance, when you're maxed out, you're costing yourself about 35, 40 points. When you're all the way down to 0, you're propping yourself up a little bit, which can be a little manipulative in regards to the process, but it's helpful, especially in situations when you need to qualify. So, if you can control that and you have the ability, and obviously the way to feather that out, if you don't have the ability to pay, let's just say you owe $40,000 or you have a $40,000 in limit, $30,000 in usage, obviously if you don't have $20,000 to get it down to jump your score about 30 points and you need 30 points and you're qualifying all other ways, you can always just add an AU and that'll feather that out. The mortgage related, and again, I understand everybody's got a different opinion on how AUs operate on approvals and stuff, but when it applies to mortgages, they're not sidestepping it. It's factored into the score. It's factored into the algos that are utilized for the bureaus don't have the ability to differentiate between an authorized user and a primary account. So you're going to get the score adjustment no matter what when it comes to the report. It's just some credit card companies now are weeding out and blocking out AUs as a way of measuring history and high watermark. But when it comes to the situation that we're talking about right now, you're talking about the fact that you can potentially, obviously if you're 15 or 20 points away and you have to be maxed out on your credit cards, you could get those cards down. Now, a lot of people, the average people that we see, who are credit, have credit issues, they may have $5,000, $7,000 in credit card limits. That are spread over a few cards because they just don't have a lot of options. You got your Credit One, your Capital One, your First Premier. There's only so many increases you can get from Capital One in the course of the calendar year. So, normally they're run up pretty tight. So if there's somebody that's sitting there around a 590, 595, and they're uptight against, let's say they're at $5,000 usage on $7,000 limit, you're effectively at 70%. You pay that down $2,000 or $3,000, you're going to make up that difference, assuming the report's where it needs to be, and you're going to cover that ground to get to the 620. A lot of that now, when you get to conventional loans and you get upwards of jumbo loans, it's a little bit different because you can't really have any hair on the the report at all, other than maybe in one collection here or there, and it has to be paid off. So there's not a lot of flexibility as far as the underwriting is concerned, and the scores it'll go back to what I said earlier, where the report leads to scores, right? Okay. So in those instances, when your report's entirely clean and you have no negative accounts, for all intents and purposes, your report should be in the 700s. Your unsecured credit ratios are basically dictating to you where your score is going to lie in the 700s. So if you're somebody that's maxed out on your cards, same scenario, let's say 10 grand in limits, your $9,900 used on, you're going to be somewhere around 705. Same scenario, if you got $10,000 in limits down to 0% usage, depending on how well the file's built out in a conservative scenario, you'll probably be somewhere around 7.7, 7.75, depending on the model, the formula and the model that you're utilizing and how well it's built out. But, if you're somewhere in the middle, let's just say anywhere from 35, 40% usage all the way up to, let's just say 65% usage, you're going to fall right in the middle, which is anywhere from 715 up to about 735. That's typically where it falls. It's not much harder to understand than that. And if you know that you can kind of yo-yo your unsecured credit ratios, it can assist greatly when it comes to things like when you're shy 15, 20 points and you qualify otherwise if you need to make up those points. Now, when does it report? That's the question we get a lot. So if you are going to pay down your cards, understand, and a lot of people don't understand this, but understand that it doesn't report immediately, right? You pay your card today, that does not report and correlate to your credit report that same day, unless that happens to be the statement date of the card. So let's just say you have a Capital One card and your statement date or your due date is the 25th. Typically, the statement date is the following day after the payment, and then it reports to the bureaus the subsequent day. So if you paid in the middle of the cycle, it's not going to report until the day after the statement date, and that's when it's going to populate to the bureau. So the way around this that we've realized over the last, and this only really started the last 2 to 3 years, is that you can actually call the creditor. Not all of them will do it, a handful of them will do it, but they'll actually go in and they'll update and they'll report the updated balance in an effort to try and assist you. But the way that you can kind of manage it, though, if you're not willing to call the creditor and update the balance after you paid it down, is just know that it's going to report the day after the statement date. That's when it's going to populate into the credit report. That's when you're going to see the adjustment on the pay down and the subsequent score increase. It's really that simple. Now, when it comes to auto loans and stuff, auto loans are more based on the substance of the report itself. So if there's no negatives, obviously, again, the score is a lagging indicator to the report. So you shouldn't really have to juice the score, because they're going to pick up on all the negatives anyway when you're submitting for it. But, the main thrust I wanted to kind of focus on today was just the fact that if you're tight, if you're, 15, 20 points away from getting a mortgage, especially FHA, VA, et cetera, in situations where you may have hair on it, but you still qualify, these are ways that you can kind of get it up without having to come out of pocket to pay credit repair company or potentially even having to do anything other than just pay it down a little. And honestly, that unsecured credit ratio works whether you have $500,000 unsecured credit or $500 unsecured credit. And the problem that people, they only get the small starter cards like $400 or $500, and they might have 2 or 3, and their total unsecured credit card usage is $700. And they've only run 300 up on it, right? Because you can do that fairly quickly, right? Depending on what you're trying to utilize it for. They don't understand why the score keeps dropping and keeps dropping because you're pressuring that ratio. It's just the ratio is measured on a much smaller scale, right? So obviously the same person that's trying to balance on the unsecured credit ratio $700 is going to be a lot tighter in their ability to use and not see the scores fluctuate than somebody in $7,000 or somebody with $70,000, right? So, it works all the way up and down the line. The minute you introduce a credit card into your report, that ratio is established. And that ratio is established, again, whether it's a small amount. I've seen Capital One spit out $100 cards. Same scenario works in that situation, $200 cards. So, it's just as long as you can be aware of why the scores do what the scores do. And the main, active scoring, denominator is the unsecured credit ratio is good, bad, or indifferent. And the amount that it can kind of encapsulate from maxed out to paid off or maxed out to, no usage. Can really be a nice way for people to control the reports on a daily basis, right? So for instance, you run your cards up 1 month, like a lot of people do. We see it coming out of Christmas. People run their cards up for Christmas, and they'll start paying it down over the course of the year. And, a lot of the clients I've been with understand that when, you get into January and it starts reporting and the scores drop, they know how to get it back up, right? It's already entrenched in their brain. They're already aware of the fact that that's why the scores dropped. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't the one inquiry you ran. It was the fact that you ran the cards up. Your usage went from 20% all the way up to 65%. You sent too many loans, 25 points, and as a result, your score drop. You know how to get them back up. You know how to pay them back down, and you'll get that buffer built back in there that's associated with the unsecured credit ratio, which helps keep it. And then So then a lot of the movements that you see with the report subsequently aren't so questionable, right? A lot of people see, a drop in the score, a jump in the score. And we've talked about the different monitoring sites. If anybody hasn't listened, we've made a whole podcast on the monitoring sites and the adjustments that certain monitoring sites do when accounts go in and out of dispute, certain ones that are more rational than others, et cetera. But, for the most part, if you're not disputing any accounts, the fluctuations that you're going to see and you don't have any negative accounts rolling onto your report, the fluctuation you're going to see is entirely related to your usage going up and down. If it does. If it doesn't, and you're just somebody that sits flat with like 10% usage every month and reports it, you're not going to see anything really change in your report. If you have no negatives and your usage stays the same, your score is going to flatten out. It's just how it is. And that's good because it gives you more predictability. But at the same time, for the people that need to use it and run it up, pay it down, et cetera, you'll know why, right? And then it'll allow you to kind of manipulate the scores a little bit in your favor. Now, again, like I said before, it's not going to – the ability to manipulate or tease the scores up is 35, 40 points to kind of move them around the way you want, like we're talking about per bureau, is good. But if you're somebody that's overwhelmed with negative accounts, it's not going to bypass, the approvals, right? You still have to have the report. You still have to have the substance in the report. It's just, the purpose of this is just to let people know when they're close and they can't get an exception on a mortgage, or if for some reason there's another product. I'm not aware of any other product where there's a scoring element there that literally is the denominator the way it is with FHA or VA, right? I mean, I know they say on conventional they want at least 680, but in essence, you just can't have a lot of negatives in those situations. Very nominal, maybe one or two tops. So you're going to land in 680 anyway. So it's not really the score threshold there. The threshold really comes into play on the FHA and the VA side. And things like this can help to kind of get you over that threshold without having to pay somebody to do it for you, and how quickly you can control it being done, right? Which is the key, because some people apply for a mortgage today, they find out they're 20 points short, and they're like, man, credit repair, it's going to take a month to get back, blah, blah, blah. So this gives you a little bit of a blueprint if you're somebody whose ratios were high, and if you're somebody that was close to the approval amount and all these different things, where you can kind of control it, get the usage down if you have the available liquidity, and then jump those scores up to where you don't have to, you don't have to go through any, unless you obviously want to, and we're happy to help you. But if you want to have more, control over the situation and get it done in a blink, this would be the way to do it.
For mortgage.
For a mortgage. But I mean, I think, when you get into situations when you're applying for credit cards, same thing, right? So the report leads the score, right? I've said that 15 times already since we've been on, and that's the fact. The report leads the score. So when you're applying for credit cards, obviously you have your alternative credit cards like, Credit One, Capital One, First Premier, Merrick, and Discover's kind of started to dabble in that pool a little bit themselves. But I mean, you get into that group, and you can have hair on your report, right? They just want to see that you're kind of on the mend, and it allows them an opportunity to be able to tax you, meaning on the rate. Capital One's average interest rate is like 22, 23% across all their cards. I don't even want to think about what First Premier is, and but it's the low-hanging fruit. It's a means to an end, and it allows people some liquidity in an environment when they're trying to be able to identify liquidity. The point I'm trying to make is that with more traditional, sustainable forms of credit, the report's going to have to be good, right? So the way that you obviously put your best foot forward when you're applying for credit cards, you can't have them maxed out, right? The banks don't want to lend to people that look like they need the money. They want to lend to people that don't look like they need the money, because it seems like a risk-free scenario, right? And that's how their algos are built out. So if you're somebody that you're applying for unsecured credit cards, and ultimately, you used 65, 70% of your cumulative usage. If you get approved, which again, right now it wouldn't happen as far as the approvals, be very difficult just given what's going on in the lending environment right now. But even in an average situation, going back to January, if you're going to get approved, more than likely you're not going to get approved for the maximum amount typically would in an otherwise normal situation if you had your usage down under 30, 20%. So this is where AUs come in sometimes, because if people don't have the ability, like I was saying earlier, to pay it down, they can feather it out with the AU. They can add a high limit AU. For instance, if you had $10,000 in limits and you had $9,000 in usage, and you just added a $15,000, and obviously in that scenario, $10,000 in limits, $9,000 in usage, you're at about 90% usage, right? So if you add a $15,000 AU, that brings your limits up to $25,000, assuming that you didn't have any usage on it, that would leave your balance at $9,000. So you would effectively go from 90% usage to about 30% usage, roughly, give or take, right? Now that's gonna cover you. It's gonna jump your score almost instantaneously once it reports, probably 20, 30 points, somewhere in that range, which is enormous. Not to mention the fact that it's going to, when you go to apply, your ratios when it gets registered is going to look like it's even rather than maxed out, which is going to appear to the bank as though you're not stressed and that you don't need it, which is what they want to see, right? So different types of credit require different kinds of scenarios, but the one constant, especially going into the end of this year, and as things start to continue to unravel here and reset as far as asset prices and such, is just you're gonna have to be really, really, really aware of these things. Which is a lot of the reason why we like telling them, doing these podcasts, because it allows people to get an idea of why they were turned down. Like, for instance, I spoke to a client today.
Okay.
Whose file were effectively done, and we're starting to map out next steps for him and stuff. And he's got a business he's starting, and he went and applied for an American Express business card and American Express personal card, and this was on his own. This was his own decision. He came to me after, and we were going over, and he said he got turned down for the business card, but he didn't get turned down for the personal. He got the personal card, which, by the way, is very unusual, right? Because the American Express charge cards are personally guaranteed, right? So, I mean, if you're going to approve for one, you're going to get approved for another, because it doesn't make any sense why you wouldn't. Now, with Amex right now, Amex is getting lambasted because of everything that's gone on, right, with their charge cards, because business in this country effectively stopped in April, and a lot of their users, the people that are their members, you can only imagine the workouts that are having to go on right now to pay those back and then stagger terms. So, what I said to him, because he said they were talking about inquiries, and he only had 4 inquiries on his report, and they were talking about he doesn't have enough credit history, which he does. And I said, look, this was just an FU, right? This was like, look, we don't want to do business right now, so we're going to give you a BS response. And, on the personal side, they're not taking as much of a hit. So we'll let you on the personal side. Here you go. But on the business side, we're pulling back, just like Chase. Chase, obviously, we talked about this a couple of podcasts ago. Chase, said they're not doing any business lending for the remainder of the year indefinitely. That means no business lending, right? So they basically and it's indefinite, and they're focusing almost all their attention on this. And they're doing it because of the fact that it's just such an uncertain environment right now as far as what businesses are going to survive. And we're not really going to know till the latter part of the year. So I just want to make sure that people understand when they apply for things. My whole reason for telling that story was that he was confused why he wasn't approved. And the reason he wasn't approved is because they just don't want to lend on the business side right now. I mean, there's just such a tremendous level of uncertainty that exists right now. I'd be surprised if really any. I mean, I'm not aware of any that are really lending aggressively. But, the plan that we're putting together for him is that we're just going to keep fine-tuning the report to the point that they can't turn them down, right? At least on the personal side. And if we got to if we got to go in on the business side and identify particular products that I know have a lot of liquidity behind them, we're probably going to wait a couple months until things start to even out a little bit. Still some clarity in the lending environment starts to clear up, so we can see what's going on. But right now, the business lending market is, I'm talking traditional sources. I'm not talking about like merchant cash advances or any of that nonsense. I'm talking about like real legitimate, like sustainable stuff that we put our clients through. Is just is difficult right now, and it's obvious it's difficult. I mean, we talked about last week about the liquidity that's going on in the mortgage market and stuff like that. So, bigger point is just that the reports need to look stellar, right, in order to get financing, like unsecured financing and stuff like that right now. And it's always best to put to have it as clean as possible, so that if we do get into an environment, which I anticipate, where they're going to continue to contract and it's going to be harder to get credit, as long as the report looks good and you don't have a lot of mess on there, you're still going to be able to get the necessary amount of credit. I think it's just going to it's going to pressure down on the files that maybe have the issues, right, and ultimately aren't being addressed or may continue to perpetuate things like that. And I think they're probably going to be the ones that get weaned out, because if you remember what I talked about before, the banks effectively determine their flow relative to the economy. When the economy is growing, they expand their balance sheet. When the economy is contracting, they contract their balance sheet.
Yes.
So that means they're lending percentage-wise almost verbatim as the economy contracts, that's how. And these are the big banks, by the way. I'm not talking about credit unions and smaller savings loans, but the big guys, your Citi, your Wells, your Chase, your PNC, your TD, et cetera. They're contracting with the economy, similar, almost identical percentages. So, when they're cutting back their money supply, as far as lending is concerned, 5-6%, who do you think is getting weaned out of that? The 5-6% that's getting weaned out is the ones that are more risky. It's associated with the risk they don't want to take. That ties back. What are the riskiest products? Riskiest products are unsecured credit cards. They yield a great percent, but the default rates are the highest. Same with auto loans. You're already starting to see auto loans start to dry up a little bit. Well, let me take that back. There's still money to get auto loans. It's just not like it was in January, right? Because they just don't want to overwhelm themselves with lending right now, still not knowing where people are going to land after the fact.
They just opened today, as a matter of fact. I think GM, they opened today to start working.
Yeah, well, they've been selling. Look, there's dealers with backlogs of cars that they got to get off the lots right now.
I'm sorry. I'm telling you,
you're talking
GM,
about the manufacturers.
The manufacturers, correct.
Yeah, you're talking about the manufacturer. I'm saying that even if they start today, and they got a 30-day lead on it, it's irrelevant because there's so much inventory that's sitting on dealerships right now that they got to get off and they got to unload, and it's because people are just starting to come out of their houses now. So I think with all that being said, I think we'll see how this plays out, but I just think it's important, and a lot of this education we provide is so people can position themselves and having the knowledge to know how to move the scores, and having the knowledge, and the most obvious way to move the scores without having to go in and do credit repair is controlling your unsecured credit ratios. And that's going to be forever. Having that tidbit information, then actually seeing how you can literally control it that way, and it's not, the fact you ran one inquiry that dropped your score, right?
Well, that's when people become responsible, though, because, a lot of people just ran up stuff and they think they could get anything. Once people start getting a house, then they go to the furniture store, then they go to the auto dealer, then they go and get some more credit cards. They think that I'm getting financing for everything, but then they don't know that they've been piling up a lot of debt. And then when they go and get denied, they're like, but what happened?
Well, it's two things probably. It's the fact that their ratios are probably toast, right? Because like I explained earlier, when you start getting to a certain level, you start getting to kind of the danger zone for banks, right? Especially on the unsecured side. The other thing is that they take into consideration a debt ratio, similar to like a mortgage, right? Where you have a debt-to-income ratio. There is a debt-to-income ratio. It's not as detailed on the credit card side, but it's comparable. So when you start leveraging yourself to a high level, both on the cards that you have extended and where you stand in regards to your income relative to your debts, both of them are going to weigh heavily on that. And I think what ends up happening is with people that don't have credit before, and they recently come into, okay, I just got a house, this, that, the other thing. They just take what they can get. You understand what I mean? And they because in their mind, they're like, somebody's lending to me and I need it right now. I'll take what I can get. And the thing we try to, when clients are done, the thing we try to position them with is not that kind of mentality. It's more getting a traditional thing, because the interest rate of furniture stores is like, it's like 25%. It's ridiculous, right? Any of that stuff is ridiculous. So, we try to position clients on the way out with, a nice chunky card they can have for emergencies or for situations, right? Even if they don't want one.
At the end of the day, I think we're pretty conservative when it comes to people. Like, of course, we help people. They've gotten, when you talk about credit ratios and how people first have to, the example you gave that they got to have $20,000 or $25,000 in revolving credit card. And then that, your credit scores get you in the door, but it's actually, approves you. It's your income minus your expenses. And the first person who got over $100,000 using our $99 do-it-yourself credit card funding system only had about $25,000 in his credit report. And that's how he ended up, with his income. He didn't have a lot of expenses. He ended up getting over $100,000. The same thing goes with the person from Georgia who fixed his own credit and also purchased the $99 credit card funding system. He got $104,000, Jay. And he...
Yeah, but that's not, you said earlier, the perspective that we provide is one of a conservative nature, because it has to be it has to be that way, because we've been doing this so long that you see the early parts when you.
I was gonna go into eventually.
You get into a situation where you realize sometimes people get in their own way, and it's
eventually they call back a year or two later and say, Gizzy, that credit card that you helped me, the $40,000 in limit. I don't know. I'm gonna have to let them go. That's 40 grand that helped you get this house, helped you get this credit card, helped you get this vehicle is now in the dumps. And life happens.
But I just think that's why there's an added level of transparency we try to add here, because there does need to be some guidance on the sustainability. And I've talked about it before in previous podcasts about where I say, we get people to a 780 and then they go and they get a $20,000 Capital One card with an 18% interest rate, which they shouldn't be doing, right? I mean, they should be a sustainable card that has the right amount of rewards. I mean, there's ways to do this right, and there's the wrong way to do it. If the objective is to come out of this and continue to grow in a sustainable way and then literally grow from that, then that's what we're trying to procure. The other side of it is to just, get your scores up high enough to go get a Mercedes, go get $100,000 in credit cards, have absolutely no minimal income, but identify every single amount of unsecured credit that you can get where you don't have to document your income and load up on it. But none of that is sustainable because it's all high interest, right? So, and it's not going to be, and sometimes people treat it like a running faucet, which I've learned. I mean, over the years and all the clients we've helped, I've become very familiar with the natural consumer's psyche, right, and their behavior relating to things. And sometimes when you take an individual who may not be, inundated with liquidity, and you introduce them to a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 card, their natural reaction is to start getting things that they've wanted for the last 5 years, right? That's just human nature, right?
Yes.
Like they might get this, they get that. Oh, it's okay. I got to make the minimum. It's not too bad if I just get this. And before they know it, they've maxed it out, and they're like, shit. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and they're like, and they bug out because of the fact that they're saying to themselves, I just ran up $55,000.
It's like a drug, Jay. It's like a drug.
Well, I mean, look, but that's why
they could floss now.
That's why we've taken, that's why we continue to take these additional measures to try and make sure everything is done appropriately, to make sure that, we're putting the client on a path of success, not a path of failure. We don't have an overwhelmingly a high return ratio, but we do have people that come back, meaning like where we fix it and then they come back. I mean, we do have that, but it's not as high as I'm sure other companies, because, we do our best to try and, prepare people for the right thing to do and get them in a position where it's sustainable. Now, obviously, we can't control somebody's income deviating or them losing a job, and they can't control that in most cases either. So, I mean, things occur in their lives that may deviate and cause them to fall behind, but for the most part, the goal of the process is then to introduce them to sustainable financing and get a better understanding of what that means, what that looks like, right? I mean, a lot of people just have gotten to latter stages in life. I mean, I'm talking 40s, and just don't know what sustainable financing looks like, right? Or prime rates. They're just happy to get lent to. Yes. And I think, that's the idea why you see somebody with a 780 go back to Capital One, because Capital One's who they're familiar with. That's who's lent to them. So they don't care if the rate's 20%, even though they're getting 20 grand. 20 grand is what they see. So, I mean, I think the key behind, just trying to set up a sustainable next step, following step, et cetera, is what differentiates. That's why we help with the financing after we don't charge. We help set up the auto loans at the right rate, because a lot of people don't know what that means, right? I couldn't tell you the amount of clients I've talked to, who, since we started doing this stuff on the auto lenders, are now so aware of it, which I think is incredible, right? Like the fact that now everybody's so cognizantly aware of the fact of how these dealers make money. Yes. And how they build in yield spreads and how it's a bit of a predatory.
Well, I got somebody right now who just commented. She got 13 inquiries like the other day. In 3 days, they ran 13 inquiries.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but it's a fact. So the more we talk about it, whether they're clients of ours or not, the more people can prepare themselves ahead of time, right? And for that kind of stuff. And, they can get their approval in hand and they don't have to get taken advantage of. Because, again, I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean, I've heard some horror stories that we've talked to experiences with clients. I mean, we've talked about in previous podcasts. I'm not going to go into them all now, but all dealers are like this. I have to preface it because we have some clients that are good dealers, for the record. But I mean, the vast majority of them, the revenue they make off of a yield spread is a large, it's broadly speaking for the dealership and for the salesman himself and the finance, it's a revenue generator. It's a rather large one. So the way they do that is they build in a yield spread. They get a commercial rate quoted to them and they jack it up relative to how they size you up as a human being and what they think and what you're aware of and what you're not and how they kind of manipulate you in most cases, unfortunately. So, if you can go in there with the knowledge, and I think just that bit of knowledge, right, just that bit of knowledge, and I know it resonated with a lot of people, and I'm getting emails and calls constantly asking about this, that, and the other thing, just so they can get clarity on it. I think just that bit of knowledge can save somebody in a single $25,000, $30,000 car loan. That could save somebody $10 grand, $12 grand over the life of the car loan if it's 5 years. Easily, the difference between an 8% rate and a 12% rate, and that's just a basic yield spread that's built at 4%. I've seen hellacious yield spreads built in significantly larger than that.
Wow.
So you're talking about the difference between 8 and 12%. Imagine the person that was quoted 2.5% from the commercial rate, and they turn around and quote them 7%. That's almost 5%. And they think they're getting a good rate at 5-6%, right? When in reality, they were half of that. And look, I'm not saying dealers shouldn't make money. They should. I just think that, I think that the way it's done and the way that it's actually arrived at, as far as, in the predatory fashion it is. I mean, again, they stopped Dodd-Frank literally. For anybody who's not familiar with Dodd-Frank, it's the legislation that came into effect after 2008 when the market collapsed for real estate, because effectively, a lot of things need to get adjusted so that we don't run into the same problem banking-wise and lending perspectives that we did back in 2008. But one of the things that they put in Dodd-Frank was the fact that brokers, mortgage brokers, the amount of constraints that they put on mortgage brokers, it effectively put the industry out of business, right? So, I mean, now you only deal with direct lenders. Direct lenders are literally lenders that fund the loans and turn around and sell them to Wall Street. If you can find a mortgage broker, it's like finding a dinosaur. I mean, it's just not a business anymore. Because
I think Joshua has a mortgage broker. Did you get an email from him today?
You talking me?
Yeah.
Who's Joshua?
Joshua Cuevas. Remember his wife? We're helping his wife get a mortgage.
What's his wife's name?
What's his wife's name?
He may be working for a direct lender, though. He may just call himself a broker. The fact that if he is a broker, God bless him. I mean, seriously, it's a really difficult business because I have the amount of overlays, the amount of caps they put. Back in the day, they used to let you. The point of me bringing all this up was the fact that back then in 2006, 2007, they used to let you build in yield spreads. Okay, and they still do. That's the one way you can do it, but you're capped in the amount of yield spread you can build in on a mortgage. So they would give you commercial rates. You could turn around and size up the person you were dealing with and jack it up. They also used to charge them points, and sometimes it would be obscene. So if you had a $400,000 loan, they would charge you 4 or 5 points if they thought you were a moron, which, is like 16 to 20 grand just at points. And people would pay because they didn't know any better. And there was so much money flopping around the system then that, you had people administering large amounts of money that they didn't even know what was going on. And they were getting taken advantage of. And as a result, they stopped doing that. The thing I don't understand is when the exact same business model is applied at a car dealership, I don't understand for the life of me how there's no regulation put in place there, right? Exact same business model, exact same process, exact same predatory nature to it. But for some reason, one of them was overly regulated to prevent it. The second largest purchase that you'll ever do in your life, a lot of people in this country, which is their car, right underneath the home, it's not important. So it's really difficult to rationalize. But at the same time, the more we can empower people to understand what exactly goes on there, the more they can know the name of the game, which is what all these are about, right? If you understand the rules of the game and why things happen, then you can make the decision at that time. If you know that they're going to build a yield spread in, and you know all that, and you still go in there and you let them run 20 inquiries on your credit, then that's your fault, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's on you. You want to get taxed on the rate because you're lazy, knock yourself out, right? If you want to get taken advantage of at another place we talked about, another situation we've discussed, and you know the reality of it is, and you still choose it, well, that's on you. But we want to give you at least the facts and provide clarity on exactly why things happen the way they are and exactly the right thing for you to do. But if you don't choose to use it, you don't have to. A lot of people are self-destructive human beings, right? So they don't necessarily always do what's in their best interest. But I know that we're getting a lot of positive feedback, and it's resonating with a lot of people because I have a lot of clients, that reach out asking more and more clarity on that. So they know how to apply it in their own personal situation, which I think is awesome. Because I think, just that can be an enormous savings for somebody, especially, given the fact we talked about in January, the average sale of a new car was $36,000. I've talked about this before. Now that's not now because everything has changed now, but pre this, and we've talked about it in another podcast, is that's insane to think at that time in January, the average wage of a United States worker was $55,000, and a new car sale amount was $36,000. Something's out of plumb there, right?
Yes.
When you see stuff like that. So if you can keep that rate down, and we can keep it obviously helps. Every little dollar helps to help equalize that situation ever so slightly. And if you can apply that across the board, then you can just be in a little more control of your finances, right? And it not be such an enormous question mark where there's no answers to the questions that you have. Because a lot of people, I think that's what they do when they look at the credit report, right? It's just a giant question mark, and they don't know why this happens or that happens.
Oh my God, yes.
And I think, though, like I said before, it's understandable.
And the big question and the big thing is Credit Karma. I saw my scores on Credit Karma. I have a couple of questions. So if you want to get your thought going, we got a bunch of questions on Facebook and on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's start with the text messages. Today I got a text from 206 area code. Is that Washington State, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Gizzy, my Equifax is showing 680 via Credit Karma. My goal is to get $250,000 in personal credit. I have multiple businesses and I'd like to get the same amount of funding for each of my businesses eventually. That's what he said.
Okay, so what are we going to start with the Credit Karma? Where should we start with the Credit Karma, or should we work?
Let's start off there. I told him.
So anybody that's is seriously considering getting into finance or any kind of funding of any kind for themselves, I would strongly urge, and we did a whole podcast on this, not to use Credit Karma for a multitude of reasons. If you're considering going to get financing. Because if you're a 680 on Credit Karma, that means you got a couple things on there, right? I mean, even if it's Credit Karma, you know that just from the door. So it would be in your best interest to go to utilize a site such as Experian that uses a more consistent scoring formula that you would see in more traditional, avenues of credit, as opposed to Credit Karma, which uses a Vantage score, which the model they use is not used anywhere. So you're not ever going to see that score replicated at any point in time, probably now or ever. So when you're using that score and you're using it as a point of reference, you're confusing yourself. And unfortunately, when you do go look, because everybody knows this because they've experienced it themselves, when you go on a site that like Experian.com or even MyFICO.com, are more traditional as far as the formulas that they're using, you see the score deviate hundreds of points sometimes. I mean, literally over 100 in some cases. Now, let's just say, for argument's sake, this individual, let's just go along with the conversation and say that his file's reasonable at 680, which it's not, because I think it's Credit Karma, and I think it's probably closer to 620 on Experian. But let's just say that's the case. Getting $250, I believe I heard you say they want to get $250,000 in personal credit cards?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, again,
And he has several businesses, and he wants to get the same amount of funding for each business.
Well, right now, I think we already talked about the business funding, right? So, I mean, I think you're going to run into a lot of pitfalls there on the business financing side. But the amount that he's looking for, I think, is unreasonable. I mean, you get to a certain point. If you don't shotgun these out, which a lot of lenders have kind of put safeguards in to protect from shotgunning. If anybody's not familiar with shotgunning, the idea is where you do all the applications at the same time or shortly around the same time. And sometimes the one lender won't see the others, and it allows you the opportunity to be able to get multiple approvals without them knowing that you're getting multiple approvals, right? Now they built, because again, with similar to other things that go on, anytime there's a hole in banking, it gets closed, and then that door gets closed pretty aggressively. So now they have ways of balancing that out. But at the same time, when you get to a certain point in unsecured credit, if you're not using it, you're going to have to be able to demonstrate legitimately that your income can support it, right? So if you have $140,000, let's just say for argument's sake, because it's not even that common, but you can do it, that you get up to $100,000 in unsecured credit, right? It's possible. And I know some people have gotten more. I know in very minute cases, people have gotten more.
Correct.
150, right?
Oh, wait till you hear there's someone on the comment that got 500,000.
Okay, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
So, look, in situations like that, what ends up happening is, in a lot of cases, you go back to the bank and you apply again, and the bank's like, "Look, we got $120,000 right now. What do you need another $40,000 for? You got $140,000, $130,000 in usage. Why are we going to give you another $30,000? We're going to be the last in line." They don't lend money with the idea, obviously, for it not to be used. So you start running into that kind of a problem the more that you try to obtain. I think that in order for things to get and amounts to get higher and things to get to that point, the report's got to be very well procured, and it's got to really, 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 everything's got to hit. I mean, it's not common for people to get up that high. I mean, honestly, 100 to 150, I think, is on the high end, in my opinion. I'm not saying the person that has 500 is telling the truth. It's difficult for me with my understanding of banking and the relationships I have in banking at all levels and all areas that banks are turning around on the credit card side and passing out $500,000 cards. But we can get to that scenario soon. So to answer the original guy's situation, I just think that I think there's probably a lot to that that's misconstrued, especially when he's trying to raise money through multiple businesses with multiple lines. I mean, they're going to run inquiries on his personal credit no matter what, because they're going to personally guarantee it. So he's going to have a multitude of inquiries. The difference with that is he's probably going to have to go back to the same lenders for each business, and they're going to pull his personal credit each time. And as a result, they're going to see the exposure they have in each business, and that's going to factor into it, especially if you're dealing with the same balance sheet. So, for instance, if you go to Bank of America, let's say you're 5 business lenders, Bank of America, Chase, just broadly speaking, Bank of America, Chase, Wells, what's another? PNC, right? Yeah. And let's say you go to them for the first business. Well, you go back and you have some. Let's say you go back to them for another business. It's going to ultimately get identified, right? Because they're going to know the exposure of that individual, whether it's in the name of the business or not. They're still pulling your personal credit. They're still going to see the exposure they have to you on multiple different levels. They're not just going to keep lending. Not to mention, if you do get into a situation where a bank wants to take an exponential amount of risk in you, right? They believe in what you're doing. They check your company, etc. Then you get into a situation where they're going to want to see documentation. I know for the longest time, Wells wasn't even giving out personal credit cards without asking for income documentation. Wow. Wells is traditionally pretty conservative in their lending. Now, I know in some cases they don't do that. They send out the pre-authorizations to existing depositors and stuff with history with them, and sometimes you can bypass it that way. But it's still not easy on that side. So, I mean, I just don't know how it would be possible. I think the key, and look, all things considered, you really have to have a report that looked pretty stellar to get to that point, right? Just the $250,000 personally, forget about the businesses. So, I mean, I think showing a 680 on Credit Karma, that probably isn't a file that's probably that stellar quite yet. So they probably have to start there and kind of go from there.
Well, he said he does have some negatives. So I said you need credit card first before doing anything.
Then you can scratch that off. I mean,
he'll email us. He'll email us to get started.
Say that again?
He'll email us to get started with credit repair.
Yeah, so I mean that's right now. Again, that's at this particular time, post February, post COVID. I mean, it's just there's just nobody really know. I'm on the front lines here every single day dealing with this stuff. So I see the contraction in the business lending. I see the and the auto lending. I see the contraction everywhere as far as capital flows. So I'm very clear upon the way the capital is flowing right now and how it's drying up. And it's drying up largely because of the fact that there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. So a lot of goals that these people have with large numbers and stuff like that, I think it's great. And depending on what your objective is, hopefully sustainable. But I think it's going to be better served going into in the next couple months when the banks start to get some clarity on how we're going to reopen as an economy, what's going to stick and what isn't going to stick. Because right now we're still at the doorstep. We've been at the doorstep for, we're a household of agoraphobes that literally are staring at the doorstep right now. We haven't still walked out. We're just taking the first step out, right? We don't know if we're going to like it outside. And the reality of the situation is that we haven't seen how we're going to restart. There's going to be plenty of businesses that do fine. But I think the fact of the matter, the gig economy, which is the restaurants, the hotels, right, the waiters, the waitresses, etc., the amount of those jobs that are going to be able to sustain, I think there's an enormous question mark. And there's a lot of industries like that right now that there's a tremendous amount of question marks. And as a result, you're seeing the banks just clamp down. And for them, they got all the time in the world. I mean, they're a lot of them, especially the big boys, you're talking $1 trillion banks, $1 trillion market caps. So they're not in a rush. They're going to still lend. It's just in this aggressive, haphazard way. I think you're going to see a lot of tightening, and you're going to continue to see tightening for absolutely good reasons. For the overall sustain, it's important for these banks not to put themselves in a risky position like they did back in 07, 08, or 09. So I mean, they're going to do the right thing right now, and as a result, they're contracting. So I just think that for anybody, if your file isn't ideal, it's best to get the file worked on and then take it one step at a time.
Okay. Okay. Another question of why Credit Karma drives people crazy, Jay. Got this question. Yes, from my wife's. She used to work as a co-worker. I'm just so frustrated and I don't know what to do. So I need an advice. This is my situation. My lease is up in May. However, I paid it off a month and a half early, so I had no more payment left, but still could use the car. 4 days later, I get an alert from credit cards that my score fell 21 points because I closed my lease. It showed as closed. I flipped out, called my leasing. They said it's open and active, just no balance, and that it's what they reported to the credit agencies. I call Equifax. They are telling me that they can't see my score, but my leasing account is open, just zero balance. They couldn't tell me what happened to my score and why, because I have to pay. But they also said that Credit Karma had its own system to calculate the scores. It made sense to me. They can't make it up. They have to report what's from the bureaus. So I still emailed them telling them what the F, and they said why the report, what's on my report, and not calculating their own score. I'm running in circles, don't know what to do. No one can see the actual score unless I pay. How's that possible? I want them to tell me why it fell off my account open, just paid off, and why it's being reported to my Credit Karma and closed on Equifax it was open and active. Where is the disconnect? She rambles some more.
The disconnect is very clear. I mean, you're using Credit Karma, unfortunately. But understand something, and we've talked about this previously. When you pay off an auto loan, we've talked about this repeatedly, and this is another thing people don't realize. When you open an auto loan or any kind of loan, whether it's a personal loan, a mortgage, etc., you will immediately get docked 20 points, 10 to 20 points, depending on the file, right? And then after the first 2 to 3 payments, you'll slowly get those points back. When you close an account, you will lose points when you close those loans because you were gifted points when you got those loans.
You're gifted, Jay, but you're gifted when you're in debt. Ain't that crazy?
Yeah, but it's just the way the algorithms work. That's why it's so important to understand the unsecured credit ratios and what really drives the scores, right? I mean, it's all just literally a formula. I mean, all these algos are just formulas, right? To take into certain pieces into considerations and others not. And one of the things that's so active, if you realize that when your mortgage reports, when your auto loan reports, when your personal loan reports, when your student school loan reports, that once you get through that first 2 to 3 month period, that it's on cruise control, and you're priced to idealism at that point, meaning that account is already factored in. So if you have a 30-year mortgage, knock yourself out, man. You're expected to pay it at that point, right? You're expected to pay it. If you don't pay, you get torched.
Correct.
So understand, if you only miss one payment, you're torched. If you got a 5-year auto loan and you miss one payment the whole time, which means on a 60-month loan, you make 59 payments, you miss one, torched, right? Depending on how recent it is, you're still going to get dinged, right? Depending on how recent it is. It's just how it works. So, I mean, in her particular situation, when you told me that it dropped 20 points when it closed, that wasn't surprising to me because that's what happens. But if you add the layer of confusion in, she's saying it's still open, which seems weird to me because although she gets to keep the car for an extra month and a half, that has nothing to do with the account being closed. Right? If she paid off the amount that she owed to them, so why would they keep it open? You know, if she gets a new lease with them, they're going to have to open up a new lease. So it's not going to have absolutely any affiliation with the old lease.
So that's all. But that's all in the agreement she signed.
What's wrong with the agreement she signed?
Well, the agreement for the lease that said you got to pay this car off because eventually she paid it off prior to a month.
But what I'm saying to you is that just because if the account showed up as closed, it would not be unusual for it to drop. Like I explained earlier, that's not unusual at all. If she's using Credit Karma, unfortunately, there isn't any free site. So that is the closest thing to a free site, Credit Sesame or whatever other free ones. But they're flawed, right? And that's what happens when other than the information we're providing, which is entirely free here on these podcasts, most of the stuff in this world that you get that's free, a large majority of it is there's some flaws to it, right? And the reason why Credit Karma is, they make a tremendous amount of money, and they were just sold for some obscene amount of money to Intuit. But the reason that they bring you on and they do it for free is because they make money off selling your information, and they make money off commissions that they pair you with new credit. Okay, they don't care about the formula. They care less about that formula. That Vantage score is meaningless to them. All they care about is getting the bodies in the door so they can monetize you as a human being through your information and through being able to pair you up in your particular file with open credit so they can get paid from whoever the lenders are, which are in their system that they attach credit with. So when you use that, you subject yourself to the confusion that's associated with that site, which we talked about in length. And even people that don't have a really firm or even a rational or even a functional understanding of credit or much less finance know that there's flaws with Credit Karma, right? And I'm sure she knows it too. But the fact of the matter is that Equifax, of course, they're not going to vouch for Credit Karma because it's an independent company. Right? And they're not going to vouch for whatever scoring because the formula that they're using is a Vantage score. And who knows even what I think it says Vantage 3.0, but that Vantage 3.0 they use deviates greatly from another one. So it's really difficult, and this is why we say, we made a whole podcast about it, that it's important to use sites that are consistent with legitimate scoring. Otherwise, you're going to drive yourself nuts. And if you already don't have an operable understanding of finance or your credit report as a whole, which a lot of people don't, and it's understandable, that's only going to compound the confusion. It will compound it exponentially, which it sounds like, she wrote a paragraph to you, maybe a short chapter in a book she wrote to you, which you just read off to me. But the fact of the matter is, which showed how frustrated she was. But the reality is that you want to eliminate a lot of the confusion. Just go to one of the sites. Unfortunately, they're not free, but if she's listening and you go to Experian.com, they do offer a free credit report. And Experian is one of the more diligent of the three bureaus. And if you see something reporting on Experian, you're going to see it on the other two. So it'll give you the idea and maybe understand why certain things happen. It is free. There's no cost to it. You can maintain it as long as you can access it. But if you're going to use Credit Karma, this is the problem you're going to run into. And unfortunately, it's going to go on and on and on. They're not going to fix it because they have no reason to fix it. There's absolutely no reason for them to fix it because the revenue generator is pairing you with credit and selling your information, meaning bringing bodies in the door and putting dollar signs on their back. The scoring model is irrelevant to them. That's like a you put a little thing in front of a baby, right, to get their attention. That's what the score is. Right, they engage you with the score, and then they get you with everything else, right? So, if you're going to use them, you need to understand what's going on or what's going on behind the scenes, and then understand that it's going to drive you nuts, and it'll continue to drive you nuts because the correlating responses that go on that site are not rational, and they're not attributable to any other functional site or any kind of healthy scoring fluctuation. So, if you can understand that, then you can use it, and you can use it without driving yourself nuts. But if you don't understand that, and you think that it's legitimate in all its scoring attributes and everything like that, you're going to literally drive yourself crazy like it sounds like she did calling around the bureaus. To get somebody on the phone at Equifax or Experian, that takes a little while. So, she must have invested a lot of time in this to just try and clarify a platform issue that exists.
You imagine that, Jay? For over 20 points?
But this is what I was talking about earlier. This is the reason why we do this stuff. Not the only reason, but this is one of them, right? Like when you see stuff like this, somebody that literally she was losing her mind or very stressed out about the fact that something reported on Credit Karma.
She is trying to buy a house, but that's what she said. She's trying to buy a house. So she saw that, she freaked out.
And it's understandable because it's a question mark. Why did it happen? Now again, when that lease does show as paid, she's going to lose points. It's inevitable. It doesn't matter what site it is, or you're going to lose points. It's just how it is. So be prepared for that. But again, you can feather that out if you get your credit card ratios down, or if you get some of the negatives off. Because in order for you to be at 620 right now, or 621, or wherever she said she's at, there's got to be stuff on there that's leaning on her. So there's multiple ways to get it back up, but definitely expect when that does report as paid that you're going to see a bit of a dip in the score. That's not uncommon.
So you're rewarded to being in debt if you keep your balances low and if you make payments on a monthly basis.
No. You don't get money. So I'm saying if you have a personal loan or a mortgage or any kind of loan products are different from revolvers. A credit card is a revolver, right? A loan has a fixed amortization, meaning if it's a student loan, it might go out. Nowadays, they go out like 100 years, but who knows? Each one's different.
Okay.
Personal loan might be 5 years. An auto loan might be 5, 6, 7. I think they even go out 8 years now, which is ridiculous. Whatever the case, it's got a firm amortization schedule. So as a result of that, they report the same way. They get boxed in the same box within the formula, right? So when that comes on, any one of them, school loan, mortgage, personal loan, auto loan, etc., you will lose points immediately when they report. Then over the first 3 payments, you'll literally get those points back, and you'll get a little bit of gift points, like maybe like 10, 15 points, depending on the bureau, right? So you'll get that points back, and they'll come back. When you close that out, those points that you got as a gift after the 3rd or 4th payment, that over and above recouping what you lost when it reported, go away as if it wasn't there.
And it's because there's that credit card or that account stopped updating. That's it. It's closed. It's not gonna go into the other account.
You're not gonna get that 10, 15 point credit for it anymore. Correct. So now they extract it, and it's not a credit card. It would be a loan. But yes, credit cards are different. That's why I was stressing it earlier about the unsecured credit ratios, because they are active. They're revolvers. They revolve every month. There is no fixed amortization on it. There's no start date and end date. Obviously, there's a start date, but the end date is perpetual as long as you keep it open, right? Now, if you close a credit card, if it impacts your unsecured credit ratio, it's going to adjust accordingly, right? But since it's revolving on the credit cards and they update every month, you control it a lot more, right? And you can fluctuate that ratio. Now, a lot of people ask the question, what if you pay down a loan balance? That does nothing for your score. So if you have a $40,000 auto loan and you pay it down to 10 grand because you ran into 30 grand, it's not going to jump your score at all. All you're going to do is accelerate the situation to get to the point where you ultimately have it paid off and you get the score to drop. So, I mean, that's all it's doing. That's all it's doing. I'm serious. It's unfortunate.
Yo, people don't know that though, Jay, because I was going to ask you that question right now. That's the question. I'm trying to get, I got another question, but go ahead. Sorry about that.
No. Go ahead. You can ask questions. I mean, I think I covered that answer.
I think you covered that. Yeah, I got another phone call today. Well, let's go to the $500,000 in unsecured credit. Miss Divine Brown, who is a fan of ours, she's watching. She does funding, but she wants to get into credit repair, so she watches us. I have almost $500,000 in unsecured credit cards. 12 of my accounts are less than 2 years, with 7 of the 12 being more than 1 year and 5 being less. I do not plan to go for a rental home now, but my mom said, I don't know that. But then she says, when I go for a loan, they tell me to close some of my accounts. I told her she was wrong, that they advise you not to apply for credit 2 years prior to closing, but they can't force you to close. My mom said they will cite that being I have too much available credit, this is potential debt.
Well, I think that's great. Like I said, I mean, you really got to have a report that, I mean, I haven't ever seen, and I'm not questioning her doing it. I'm just saying I haven't ever seen somebody get that much unsecured credit. She did. I think that's spectacular that she was able to do it. I think especially able to position herself ahead of what's going on and what's going to be going on going forward. As far as the mortgage is concerned, she's absolutely right. They can't force you to pay down unless you have a balance, right? They can't force you to close it unless you have a balance. Now, it wouldn't factor into the debt to income. That's normally, I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had arguments with I'm talking agents, not lenders, because now we just deal with the lenders themselves. So back in the day, it used to be more about dealing with brokers before all this stuff happened. You get into arguments with all the time because they all think, a lot of them, not all of them, but some of them think they have a lot of the answers, and their answers are based on their own opinions because they don't have some manual there, and their opinion would be, you need to do this, you need to do that. Same as when you go to a branch at a bank, you walk in, that guy's just reading from, he's a glorified customer service rep, right? And unfortunately on the mortgage side, although a lot of the mortgage guys know the products that they're offering and they're probably well versed in that, the credit side is nothing that they're taught at any point in time. So they're learning just like the person that they're talking to. And they're giving their best assumption based on what they think. So when they say that stuff, they're doing in what they think is good advice. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's not. And in a lot of cases, even more cases, it's apropos to the overall goal. Now, I mean, I don't see modern day people say, I haven't ever heard anything about don't apply for credit 2 years before. That has no bearing on anything. It just would have no bearing on anything. But the fact of the matter is that I do agree that they can't force you to close it. It is a large amount. So, it's an exponentially large amount when it comes to unsecured stuff. And if you consider that the minimum payment, if you did fully utilize all 500 of that, is 2.5%. I mean, you're paying $12,500 a month. Relative to what the income is. So, it would probably come into a factor how high it is because it's just such an extraordinarily high number on a personal credit report, right? I mean, I have a client of mine that is a billionaire, and granted, she doesn't have $500,000 in personal credit, right? I mean, I'm literally billionaire. I mean, he doesn't have $500,000 in unsecured personal credit cards. So, I mean, it would be something that would be. I mean, it's a unique situation, which, like I said, is I think it's impressive. I just don't. They may ask you just because of the size of it. You may have to make some kind of a concession. I don't know, because it's such an unusual number. I haven't ever seen it, so I haven't seen it factor into. I haven't ever heard a lender post 2009, 2010 ask somebody to close a credit card, because, theoretically they can. How can they force you to close it? But, when you get into 500,000, that's a different environment. So I think it would be interesting to see how it would get looked at. I just can't say with 100% surety, because I haven't ever seen somebody get that much on the personal side and sustain it. But good for her that she was able to do it.
Okay. All right. So Armando, who's our customer, who's getting a lot of results for credit repair because of John, thank you, John, has a question. I have a secured business card for my trucking company. I've had it for 2 years. Is it possible to make myself an authorized user so it can boost my personal credit?
Myself an authorized user so I can boost. I don't understand what he means. Maybe.
Okay.
Is he saying he wants to add himself
to a secured credit card, secure business credit card?
Yeah, his secure business credit card won't report on his personal credit unless, even if he wanted to. The only two credit card lenders I'm aware of that report business cards on your personal credit report are Capital One and Discover. And Discover has really scaled back their business lending, so it's typically just Capital One.
Okay.
If he had a card that was in the name of the business, and it's already not reporting on the personal, even if he should be the only one on that card already, so he wouldn't be able to add himself as an authorized user anyway, and it wouldn't report anyway because it's in the name of the business. He would just be adding an additional card holder, which is how it works on the business side. So I don't think it would work the way he thinks it would.
Okay.
If I understood the question correctly, I'm not sure.
He has a secure business credit card, and he wants to add himself as an authorized user on that secure credit card.
Yeah, so then I did understand. Then no, it wouldn't be productive.
It wouldn't be productive. Okay. All right. So we also have Sherzon Green, which I know for a long time. I met her. She says, if my score is 675 and my husband is 725, can we get a balloon loan for a home of 1.5 million? We currently own in Harlem and don't want to sell our brownstone yet. Our current mortgage is with Chase.
It's with what?
Is with Chase.
Okay. So, I mean, we got to unpack that for a little bit. So, I don't know. So,
all right, she has a 675.
There's a couple different questions we got to start with. First, where is she monitoring her scores? What site to get 675 and 721? We can start there. But if the objective is to get did she mean jumbo loan? Is that what she meant?
Yeah, jumbo. Balloon, yeah. Balloon. So I'm pretty sure it's jumbo because it's 1.5 million.
Right, but a balloon effectively means like you have a period that you have the loan set for, and it becomes a balloon after that you have to pay it off, right?
Yeah, that is true.
I don't know if that's what she means, because I don't know if that would make any sense relative to the rest of what the question she asked. But obviously, if the question is that you already have a personal residence in a brownstone in Harlem, you're trying to buy a different house to move into as personal residence, you can effectively rent the existing property, or if the rent covers up to the mortgage payment 125%, because they're only going to give you 75% credit for whatever that rent is. So, for instance, if you're renting it for $4,000 and your mortgage payment is $3,000, they're going to give you credit for 75% of the $4,000, and then it's going to be $2,800. You're going to effectively be losing $200. That's going to count against your debt to income ratio for the new house, right? You'll have to supply leases and stuff for that in order to be able to substantiate it, and then you can go, if you got the money and everything like that, to be able to get approved. Now, I don't know what you guys' income is because we didn't even get into that. Typically for jumbo, the cutoff is around 680. So depending on the site you're using, if we lob out Credit Karma, that could deviate exponentially, as we've talked about. So if it's more of a legitimate site, you guys are around 680, 721, all things considered. I would think credit shouldn't be that crazy of a situation. You being at 680 on the maybe there's a little bit of hair on it. I don't know. But
she says she has 15 inquiries. She said, I purchased my car on March 31st and Chase approved me, but they wanted more money down. What? But the car dealer for the car. I purchased my car on March 31st, and Chase approved me, but they wanted more money down. I don't know if that's for the vehicle, Cherzon, or for the real estate that you're trying to purchase. But the car dealership,
it doesn't make sense. I mean, most lenders don't. I mean, most retail lenders. I couldn't tell you one time I've ever heard a retail lender say, "Yeah, you want to give $50,000 a car? We'll give you 45, but you got to come up with 5." The only time they would do that is if she was overpaying for the car, because lenders can only. Auto lenders are capped at 110% of the value of the vehicle.
Okay, she says my house is worth $4 million. My rental income is $22,000 a month. And she says, yes, my car, for my car, yes.
Okay, so the with the car again, it would only be if she was overpaying for the car, because the car lenders, any auto lender, there's not a requirement for down monies on it. I mean, unless you're in a really low, like buy here, pay here, and they'll just squeeze you because they got you in a headlock and they're foot on your throat already. But most lenders will lend up to most auto lenders, 99% will lend up to 110% of the value of the car, what they deem the value of the car is. So if you're overpaying for the car, and they determine, because they have a desktop on all vehicles, similar to like a Kelley Blue Book, but it's like their own desktop scenario of it, and they arrive at the value, and they'll give you 110% of that. Now,
she says a Land Rover, Jay.
Okay, but I mean that doesn't.
I mean, it's probably 80 grand, 120,000.
Say that again?
It's probably $120,000 car. So.
Yeah, but that's not the point. The point is that what I'm saying is that for them to ask for more money down, there's not a down element when it comes to auto lending. It's not like buying a house. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that they don't say, yeah, we'll give you 90% of the purchase of the car. They're all 100%. How many I probably done more auto loans myself and arranged them for clients over the course of the 10 years that we've done than most dealerships close, right? So, I mean, it's just, they don't ask for that. So when they ask for that, it's because you're outside of the lending parameter, and normally it's because you're overpaying for the car, and as a result of that, I mean, the only other time you would see that would be if it's on a really, really, like a buy here, pay here, and they want the cash, because it typically takes about.
Oh, she says she had to put down $4,500 instead of $0.
Again, no, but that sounds, either that's a dealer playing games and she got the financing through the dealership and they're playing games with her, or she overpaid for the car, one or the other, because there's no requirement of down monies. There's just not, unless.
Could it be that she had another? Could it be that you returned a car, right?
Well, I mean, it could be the negative AM, that they rolled in and ultimately she paid more for the car, because they would roll that into the purchase price of the car. That's what I'm saying. So it's not. It doesn't mean that the sticker tag she paid for the car was over. But I got news for you. A lot of people overpay for the car when they go to dealerships, right? So it's not uncommon. It's not an insult. If you know what you're walking into, it can better prepare you for it. Buying cars are like buying furniture, man. Unless you get them used, you have no idea what the true value is. You have a relative range, and it gets manipulated constantly by the dealerships. So, I mean, to be $4,000 upside down on a Range Rover, you got to come with it. It could be from negative AM that got rolled over into the loan plus taxes and tag and title, and it might have just exceeded the value. But it all boils down to that ratio, which is 110% of whatever they deem the value of that vehicle is relative to the VIN number and all the specs and everything like that. That's the only time it will come up. So maybe that's how it worked out.
I had another car and it was totaled after 6 months. It's a lease. She got a lease. Jay, so she put $4,500 down.
Oh, well, a lease is totally. They ran 13 inquiries to get you a lease. The lease is the manufacturer of the vehicle does the lease, so that would be Land Rover Financial. You know what I mean? Like it would be. You know, I mean, what would they need the 13 inquiries for to put you in a lease?
Cherzon, did you go to like a mom and pop dealership, or did you go to Land Rover?
They went to a mom and pop dealership. There's no other options. When you lease a car, you're renting it from the manufacturer of the car.
Correct. So they went to a Land Rover.
You can't go to BMW Financial lease terms on a Land Rover.
Yeah,
right?
Land Rover Monmouth County, right? I'm asking her, but I'm pretty sure she'll say yeah.
But it's any Land Rover though.
Yes.
It's any car in America that you finance or that you lease. You're renting it from the manufacturer of the car through the dealer, right? Correct. But the terms are for the manufacturer, which is why again. Lexus Financial is for cars that get rented Lexuses that get leased, right? Toyota Financial, same thing. BMW Financial, same thing. It's when you lease a BMW, that's who you make your payments to. That's who finances it. Land Rover, same deal. So, I mean, it's all the same scenario. I don't know what they would need to run 13 inquiries for, though.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Why they run so many inquiries?
That's crazy.
Shirzan. Because if they would just run her credit, and then okay, cool, this is the options that you have.
No. But you don't. Again, if you're going into lease, that is your only option for that car. Like if you go into a Mercedes-Benz dealership and you want to lease a Benz, they run you through their leasing company.
But they said she said
Financial
ran through many banks.
But many banks don't lease a car.
Correct.
They can't take a collateral position on a car they don't own. When banks lend money on a car, they take the slips. They own your pink slips on your car. That's the title. That's effectively the title to the mortgage that a lender lends against. That's their collateral. When you lease a car, there's no security for the lender. Why would they lease? Why would Santander do a lease for Land Rover? They have no way of making it. It's effectively an unsecured debt for them, which Land Rover still owns the car. Land Rover's not financing it. You as the borrower, you're effectively leasing it from them. So why it has to be through the manufacturer of the car because they're the still owner and they're not giving up title to it. So there's no other way to do it. I mean, it functions. I don't understand. Maybe she tried other avenues. I don't know. But there's no other way to do it. Right. I mean, it's just you can't go to another bank and ask them to finance a lease on a different vehicle. It wouldn't. It's not possible. Not logical.
Correct. She's saying whoa, but Shirzan, she knows for a long time. She's been wanting to tune in. So definitely hope you got some clarity from this conversation that we're having on. Thank you for commenting, Shirzan. Let me see. Hey, bud, I have 7 accounts with late and in collections. Should I pay the debt before I have you start on my credit, removing the derogatory stuff?
Well, again, disclaimer, we don't tell people not to pay their debt. That's not how we operate. But we don't need the debts to be paid in order to remove them. They can be paid, unpaid, open, close, etc. It doesn't weigh on our ability to do it. The one thing that it does prevent is, albeit a very small percentage, typically 5 to 10% of the time, it prevents the potential of it being resold at any point in time. So if you pay them off, you're effectively eliminating that, even that 5 or 10% of it happening, eliminating that entirely if you pay them off and you settle them. But, I mean, in order to get them off, we don't need that to be done. It's not a prerequisite for us to be able to do it.
Okay. All right, cool. So we also have... we got a famous question. D Perdomo, what's going on, D? During this pandemic, is it harder to get collections off of people's credit?
No, I don't think. I mean, I'm not seeing. Look, we've been going through this since the last 3 months with all these pandemic-related questions, and honestly, it's business as usual. I'm not seeing slower response times. I'm not seeing faster response times. I'm not seeing creditors not get back. I'm not seeing any deviation whatsoever. In March when it first hit and the market was tanking like an anchor, and there was a little more hysteria, you definitely saw the 3 bureaus push to like the last minute to get results back, but they stayed within the window and they got the stuff back. But I mean, since then, you got to understand, it's almost entirely run algorithmically.
Yes.
Right? I mean, we talked about this before. There's roughly 375, 400 million people in this country, and Experian, which is the biggest of the 3 bureaus, I think has 10 or 12,000 employees total. So, I mean, there's not a lot of human element that exists in this reporting stuff. And they own a system called eOscar. It's a coding system. It's, that's how they communicate with the creditors.
eOscar. I thought it was Metro 2.
It's eOscar. Look up eOscar. It's very clear in there. Everything's very clear.
I told somebody Metro 2 today.
They communicate through eOscar. It's a functional system, and it's almost all the lenders. That's the way that it's like a binary system. It's a coding system that they can communicate. It allows them to communicate quickly for other people that ask the question, what happens if they don't get back? They're going to get back. If all you had to do was push a button, you're going to get back. and they do get back. It's not that they don't get back. And if you look up Oscars, you can find the site and go through it, and it details all the specifics of how they operate and things like that on their site, because it is a for-profit company, right?
Yes.
You can get very familiarize yourself with exactly how they communicate with the creditors and through a process and such. But that's how they do it, that has nothing to do with the pandemic, right? So, I mean, it ends up, to answer Dee's original question, no, I'm not seeing any kind of difference. I mean, if there's a difference, it may be related to the account itself, or how it's disputed before, or how it's reporting, any number of things that would take it longer. But I'm not seeing the pandemic have anything to do with dragging it out or expediting it, in my opinion.
Okay. All right, cool. Hopefully we answer your question. Now, Joshua Cuevas, who's watching us on Facebook, he says, will you post this on YouTube? Yes, it's live on YouTube and on Facebook right now. I leave it. It's going to be in the replay, so you can watch it anytime you want. Your question is going to be at 1 hour and 20 minutes that we're going to ask. Can you explain my wife's situation to him? Experian is 100 points lower than TransUnion and Equifax. So Joshua, his wife, is doing credit repair with us. They're going to go.
Which one? Hold on. So let's just back. Which one is his wife? Because I feel like they have different
Monica.
last names.
No, it's not Monica. I'm just. Hold up.
Because they don't have the same last names.
No, but
Is it Madura? Claudia Madura?
Claudia. Yes.
Okay.
Did he send you an email about her today?
No, not today. He sent an email last week about them needing to get into a house, and I said we already had, we only got done one dispute. We got the first dispute, we got them done. We got them up to FHA level in one dispute, which is what they wanted to buy.
Okay. So all right, cool, Jay. All right.
Yeah, I'm clear on every client. I didn't know his last name was. I knew her husband was, part of it. I just didn't know what his last name was. But go ahead.
Okay. So he went to the mortgage lender. He told me he was a broker today. He called me, and then he said, "Why is it that my Equifax and TransUnion scores are up way high? My mortgage broker wants to say, you guys did an amazing job, but why is it that Experian is 100 points lower than Equifax and TransUnion?" I told him, correct me if I'm wrong.
Hold on. I'll just give the easy answer. I mean,
okay, because you know the report. Hello.
Yeah, we're one dispute in right now, and I know when we left, we just submitted the second round, which I think I told him on Thursday when we emailed that, you got to wait to get it back, but he's got a goal in mind, and as we get the scores get higher, that goal is getting. I know he's got his eye on something, and I'm not sure that
a lot of people are itching right now, Jay.
Yeah, which is honestly, in all fairness, it's not in their best interest to be itching, because values are going to dump.
Yes.
Like, I mean, you're buying at the top end of the market. You're going to buy at 96.5% financing. You're going to watch values deteriorate over the next 6 to 12 months.
But the interest rates are so low, Jay.
It's irrelevant, though. It's amortized over 30 years. You're not paying in your first 15 years of a mortgage. A fraction of it's going towards the principal. So if you again, look, anyway, let me just finish this point, and I'll go back to Joshua. And Joshua, I'm not trying to discourage you from buying a house. I'm just speaking broadly. If you go and you finance 96.5% today, and you buy a house for $500,000, the market tanks. Let's just call it 15%, because I think we're in desperate need of at least a 15% correction. Right? That drops you, I don't know, 80 grand on the value of the property, and you're financed at literally with the down monies and everything, probably 510, because you're putting down 3%. Puts you at 485 plus roughly 4 to 5% of closing costs. Puts you at about 515, and it's going to be worth about, I don't know, 420. I can tell you how people react when they realize they're upside down in the house. They lose their shit. And you want to talk to anybody back in 07, 08 when they realized that they were underwater in their mortgages? They called their bank and said, "I'm not paying you anymore."
Yes. And
the banks are like,
the realtor, okay. But the realtor told me that being in real estate is my mortgage, the value of my real estate is always going to go up.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And honestly, look, going back, I'm just saying that, like, people that are itching to buy right now, it's misplaced haste. I mean, patience is a virtue, but I understand if people have an itch to scratch, and if it's on the front of their brain, it's not going to leave there. So to answer Joshua's question, The Experian is always the toughest of the three. In a very rare instance, do we get Experian done first and then the other two. They're normally the last to get done. They're normally the slowest moving because they're the most difficult and they fight the hardest. Although I still think we have our Experian up rather significantly since we started, but I guess relative to the other two, I haven't seen the pull that happened today with the bureau. So that you had your lender pull. So I don't know what those scores came in, and I know they were pretty. I know when we broke down the first round, all three scores were up exponentially. So, I mean, and more than enough to get you the FHA loan. But to answer just a very simple answer is that Experian is just typically the most difficult of the three. But broadly speaking, it really shouldn't matter because your FICO score is your middle score. So if your TransUnion, your Equifax were up significantly, they're going to use the middle score of the three. So even if your Experian, not that it is, but even if your Experian was a 499, the other two were 720, your FICO is effectively a 720. So it plays nothing into the broader process as long as you still qualify otherwise. So it shouldn't really matter from an underwriting perspective unless you're just, they have an issue with something on the Experian report. But, typically speaking, just very simple answer, Experian is the more difficult of the three, and subsequently they fight the hardest, although we literally just submitted the second round, I think, last week. But, either way, I'm happy. I don't even know if you guys got approved, but or where you landed, because I'm just now being told this while we're on the phone. But either way, I'm glad to hear things are moving in the right direction.
I told them if they listen, people who are going to go and get a mortgage, okay? I don't care if this is your boy, your friend of a friend. If you're going to go and get a mortgage and they pull a tri-merge report, which is the report that a mortgage company pulls to see your three bureaus and see your FICO score, you are entitled to a copy of that credit report. Don't think that they have it and they don't want to give it to you for some reason. No, it don't work that way. You are entitled to that credit report. Now, when you are a customer, and like Joshua, he goes and he's itching. Well, he goes and runs his credit. He has to give us that credit report so that we can compare it to what we see online through the credit monitoring. Is that right? Correct? Is that right, John?
I mean, look, it is what it is. He did it. It's fine. I'm assuming that
Claudia. Yeah, it's Claudia. Claudia Maduro. Yeah, that's his name.
Yeah. So it is. We normally don't like people applying mid-dispute. We normally don't like people applying after the first round unless it's absolutely mandatory. We didn't have a deadline when this started. This deadline came about after he started seeing the scores go up, so it immediately presented itself out of nowhere. So, I understand the motivation, and he sees it becoming a reality, and he's got to do what he's got to do. So, we normally ask to allow us to kind of guide you through that, just so disruptions, because what happens is if accounts are in dispute when the lender originally pulls your report. So, for instance, let's say today he got his credit report pulled and all the scores were good enough, but there was accounts, let's say there was one or two accounts left, and they were showing this, a dispute notation under account. The lenders won't accept that. So what'll happen is in the condition of the approval, it'll say we have to repull your report in 30 days before the close. And any number of things can occur in that period of time, right? Yes. So if you properly position yourself and you don't have them in dispute, so therefore having to get your credit pulled again, because normally a credit report, depending on the lender, can be good for 60 or 90 days, right?
Correct.
So, if by doing that, submitting it when they're in dispute, you're subjecting yourself to an additional pull, which is unnecessary. Plus, it taxes you on the additional pull because they're pulling all three each time. So it's just, again, there's always calculated ways of doing things. And sometimes when emotion is involved, that gets vacated. So he explained what, he wants to get his family to a house. I respect that, all that stuff. It's just, it's always best for anybody to just let us guide you, literally guide you. Correct. Because like you're talking about earlier, we know what, number one, what it takes, but B, we know exactly what needs to be done so that you don't hit pitfalls. Because chances are those accounts were in dispute today, and chances are if he wasn't going to get the approval, they'd have to pull it again. So now you just effectively wasted 6 inquiries on a situation where it should have been 3 and it could have been efficient. That's all. So
correct.
It is what it is.
I know. Okay, so we have Brian Kent who asks, hi, how long does an unsecured loan have to be under the statute of limitations before I dispute?
Oh, there isn't any.
I thought it said before it gets removed, and I answered it depends on your state, on the statute of limitations. You know how long an account gets to stay on your credit report?
No. It's not how long it stays in your report. It's how long they can collect. That's the statute. Different states have different amounts of times they can collect on debt. Some are 4 years, some are 7 years. It's different, meaning like if you go bad on a debt, they can only collect for so many years after that. But the reporting element, the 7-year reporting element, that's fixed. That's totally different.
But how about so he could do it at any time, dispute it.
He could dispute an account he opened yesterday if he wanted to. I mean, there's no. If I understand, correct me if I'm wrong. If I understood the question correctly, he said, "How soon can he dispute an unsecured personal loan?" Is that what he said?
His question is, how long does a unsecured loan have to be under the statute of limitations before I dispute? So it's kind of a question that is like, unsecured loan, I guess, could be a credit card, or it could just be personal unsecured loan.
He means I'm pretty confident he means an unsecured personal loan. I think that, but there's not. I mean, it's two different lanes. The reporting statute, and you can dispute an account whenever you want. I mean, if you know what you're doing. I mean, there really is no. I mean, I haven't ever experienced all the years I've been doing this. There needing to be some sort of a buffer period that you need to wait while an account is open or closed in order to be able to dispute. That's not something that we have a problem with. So I would say you could dispute it whenever you wanted. I mean, you really can. I mean, there's really, one has nothing to do with the other in that capacity. Okay. If I understood his question correctly.
Okay. So Travis Benjamin asks, I have a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. How can I raise my credit scores? Is it hard to remove Chapter 7 bankruptcy? I just filed it December 2019.
Well, the obvious answer is how to get the scores up is to remove the accounts, right? I mean, extract it from the report, and your scores go back where they were.
Well, the bankruptcy is one thing, but removing the accounts that were included
in bankruptcy. Yeah, I mean, anything that you included, I'm speaking broadly, but I mean, anything you include with the bankruptcy obviously goes together hand in hand, right? So you'd have to get all that off and extract all of that. The points are associated. And I think this is what you're about to say, because a lot of the points associated with the BK reporting are the accounts included in BK. You'll realize that if you're somebody that has BK and you remove all the accounts included in BK and you just have the BK on there, you'll be in the 700s. You'll realize, and a lot of people are astonished when they see this, that we've helped remove the BKs. And yes, we can remove BKs. And for us, the way we remove negative accounts, it's the same process as removing any kind of account. That's not to make it sound simple, because it's not easy to remove these accounts, any kind of account. But it's just to say that a BK is like any other account in how it reports and attaches to the report, and how we get it off and detach it from the report. So in a broader process, it's the same process, whether it's a BK, a collection, child support, foreclosure, etc. So once you extract that from the report, obviously the scores will go back up, and you'll be back to a point of normalcy, a prime point, and you can go back to borrowing again. I'm not trying to make it sound simple, because it's not. It is a process.
Correct.
But that's what ultimately have to happen. And yes, again, to answer the question, which I think he's most concerned about, is we do remove BKs all the time. I'm sure you've seen the videos, but at the same time, it's like any other account. It can take a lot of people see. This is I've said this a lot, and I mean it.
Okay.
If we're normally the first person to get a file and nobody else has touched the file before, those files move along very, very quickly. Yes. The problem that we run into is when we work behind other companies, or somebody's been trying to dispute their stuff themselves. I couldn't tell you the amount of people that will try to dispute
other companies disputing. People disputed themselves.
Not only that, but they'll do it themselves.
But John, another thing, disputing with fraud, disputing with a police report. Bro, exactly. You're making our job harder. Not even harder, but it's just more tedious work.
No. It is harder, because one of the easiest things for a lender to ascertain nowadays is validity in an account, right?
Okay.
I mean, we're in a technological era. When somebody buys, I'm not even exaggerating. When somebody buys one of the credit life systems, when I go into the system,
okay,
I literally know the doorstep. I see the doorstep. That's the kind of technology that there is right now, where I can see where the order was placed. I can be on your doorstep, right? That's what Google has it basically introduced to us. So the point I'm trying to make is, think how easy it is for a lender to rule out if an account is yours or not. They can attach the bank account that you've been paying with, it's yours. To rule out validity of an account is like waking up in the morning. It's It's just a natural procedure, and most people think they could just claim general fraud. Oh, they'll go on Equifax or Experience. This isn't my account. This isn't my account. This isn't my account, and they'll have early success because they'll get like a collection off or something, right? Which didn't have the social to begin with, so they don't realize that the reason why that 1 or 2 accounts came off was because when they were submitting it to report, it didn't have any of the basic information it needed, none of the skeleton of it, right? So it came off easily because it was trash. The fact of the matter is, they'll keep going back in though. Every single month, and they'll do it for like 8 months. They'll be like, you know what, it's not working now. Let me hire somebody. Problem is, they've gotten to the point where it's every one of the disputes is deemed frivolous at that point, right? And that's why they stopped. They didn't stop because they stopped getting results after the first dispute. They stopped because the bureaus literally stopped entertaining their disputes. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So it's like stuff like that we have to work behind. And yes, the police
but then they see 2-day credit repair results. They see everything removed in 5 days, our videos, and they think, oh, can I get those fast results too? Well, they made a mess. You made a mess.
Yeah, but then here's the thing though, of 100% of the clients that come in the door, when you ask them if anybody worked on it before, 70% of them say no until we get the first round back, and I can tell if it was, right? And then it's like, oh, so it was. Oh, yeah, I remember now. Yeah, I guess it did. Yeah, that was a while ago, though. You sure it was a while ago? Because it says it was last month. Oh, yeah. I got to go. It's like, it allows us to set an expectation properly for the customer, right?
Correct.
And, that's why we just, anybody that's coming in, we give them broad averages based upon the amount of years we're doing, the amount of clients, because that's the only way we can do it. You don't always get the facts coming in the door. And I understand people aren't necessarily proud of things that they've tried to do and maybe it didn't work. I get it.
That is true.
It's just sometimes it can make our process and our ability to set the expectation a little bit easier, because obviously just as much as the performance itself and removing the accounts, setting that expectation is significant in this business. You know what I mean? When you don't want to give everybody the best case scenario. You want to give them the middle of the road expectation, which is based on average, which is based upon a lot of years and a lot of clients that they can hang their hat on. If you miss by a little bit, it's okay because you got them where they needed to be. If you exceed it, you under promise and over delivered. If you hit your mark, then you did your job. So, I mean, that allows us, all that information allows us to do our job. You know what I mean? Like, that's exactly what ends up happening. So the more we can avoid, not having the proper amount of information, the better we can obviously do what we need to do.
You know who calls me almost every week? Tim from Tim Sutherland. He wants to buy a house. He's itching. He's like, yo.
He's another one. The first round, we got his scores up, and now he sees it's a possibility. And
that's what happens. Yes. And then I got to do something.
And I get it though, right? Like, I understand. It's just when anybody that's listening that's not a client of ours, and people that are clients of ours, we get started on the files, and then we do intake calls. We have, depending on the person, I mean, there's some clients we have 30, 40-minute intake calls with where we go over everything. Some people keep them shorter because they don't have questions, but we go over everything in a lot of detail in an effort to try to avoid any confusion, right? To try and set the expectation, to really cement the expectation pertaining to what it is we're doing, so the client has an understanding. The difference is when you show them that everything you said you were going to do, you're doing, and now they're like, wow, I can get a house now. Wow, I can do this now. Wow, I can do that now. Then it's like it opens their eyes up to something that they thought was 50-50 at best. Why? I don't know why they thought it was 50-50 at best, but 50-50 at best, right? Yes. So now I'm sure this is similar to Joshua too, the same way. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it's similar. Cloudy's husband and Cloudy, that they just want to get in the house. Now they see it as a reality and they're excited for the house. I get that, right? Yes. But in order for us to make your life easier, we need to finish our job, right? It's going to make your underwriting easier. It's going to make the conditions that they spit out for the mortgage easier. It's going to make so many other things easier for you when you go to buy the house that, but sometimes the patience just isn't there, and the excitement and the emotion is too much of an attachment that they just got to go do it right away. So, and I get it. I mean, you can't control, sometimes it has to be scratched, and I understand. But I mean, with Tim Southern, he's another one that, we got the scores up in the first round. We're in the second round, and I assume that's why he's calling, because the scores went up rather significantly.
Oh, yeah. He wants to buy a house yesterday. It's like he's one of those people that drives around because he knows he's almost there. So he calls me and says, well, I haven't ran my credit yet, but I'm going around looking. I'm like, all right, cool. I tell him to email because you got all the answers. But I'll tell him, just be patient. We're gonna get you there. That's been a
No,
customer that
he was yeah. Trust me, he's. I
he's
think the reason
even.
why you're saying is because the scores jumped the way they did in the first round, and seen as a reality. And I think there's also a misconception that the higher your credit score is, the more you get approved for a mortgage, for people that aren't familiar with the mortgage process.
Yes.
And
That's so true.
I think that when we tell them, look, FHA is 620, right?
But I don't think that some people don't understand the numbers. I think we need to have like a podcast on understanding the numbers of how they come up with the amount that they're going to approve them for. Income minus expenses.
Yeah, but I think sometimes that's easier done on like visually, because I talk fast and then all the numbers I spit out, I'm sure
I'm getting better with the production side of things to making my videos, so we're gonna be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be smart, because I think that way they could see it and be like, oh, okay, right? Because that's more of a visual thing, just given the amount of, like, I went through it with one of our clients today. A client of ours named Romel, he's getting ready to buy a house, and we were going through he sent over his income on Friday, broke down all of his debt to income based on his gross. We backed out everything. We arrived at a number he could be approved at scenario A, B, and C, and it allowed the opportunity to kind of weigh it, figure out what the best time he wants to go forward with it is. At least he has in his back pocket what he knows he's good for, right?
Was Romel the one that wanted to lease a truck or finance the truck?
No, it was Jamar.
Oh, that's Jamar. Okay.
Yeah, it's Jamar. And he did get the truck.
But how? Did he lease the truck or did
he bought it? He bought it.
Was it better for him? He needs to do an intake call with us.
Yeah,
he needs to do.
He bought it. He bought it, and it was a couple years old, and he bought it like that because he said that the money he'd save on the lease, he could save and set aside. So if anything happened with the truck, he could put it back into the truck. But if he's able to keep the truck, good, then that's his money he just saves, right? Which is smart. I mean, he arrived at the right way. He's a smart dude.
Yeah. He did his numbers.
Yeah, he weighed all the options exactly how I would have told him to do it, and he arrived at the absolutely appropriate decision on his own. He just ran it by me after, and I'm like, dude, sounds great. I mean, yeah, you did good, man.
We got 20 minutes before we hit 2 hours, but I got these questions here. Okay, so Miss Divine, the one that has almost 500,000, says, makes me feel rich having the bank's money. And then she's put her parentheses. Hopefully they don't cut my limits in these times as they are all lessening their exposure.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I was going to say that when we talked about it earlier. I just didn't want to rain on it because I was giving a credit for having that high. But there's if they're not being used, there is a real possibility. If things continue to contract, that they could cut back some exposure there just because of how much it is. I mean, it's a lot of exposure. So, especially if it's not being used, I wouldn't be surprised. But in any event, it's still an accomplishment. Like I said, I've been doing this long. I haven't heard anybody get 500,000. So that's
crazy. That's the first
number.
Okay, so then Travis Benjamin says, I've been watching your show for a while. I think you are good, real good at this credit repair. Thank you, Travis. And then Gizzy, I showed you, Shirzon, very true. You will go crazy because it's so different. Go to Experian. Oh, about Credit Karma. Credit Karma just want you to come so they can sell you BS credit cards. Okay. Yeah. So we got Andre Arnold, and he said, in the future, I want to invest in some commercial property, small apartment complex, 16 to 20 units. What does my credit score have to be, and what down payment is required on commercial property? That's a question for John. John is a real estate investor too. This guy, he knows his stuff.
Right. So on the commercial side, when it comes to apartment buildings like that, if you go to a local lender and they're interested in the deal, normally they're going to want 20-25% down in most cases. If you go through like a direct lender, they'll normally pump it through a lot of insurance companies, lend on stuff like this, believe it or not. And they'll normally want 20-25% down. If you don't have the full 20-25% down, what they do is this thing called a bridge loan. It's called mezzanine financing, which will bridge the gap between, let's just say they want 25% down. It'll normally cover like a 10 to 15% difference. It's almost like it is a second. The interest rate's higher. It's normally significantly above prime, whatever you're borrowing, but it comes to the table with that difference. So typically, in a lot of cases, you'll come to the table with like 10%. That you'll need to come down with. Again, this is under normal economic conditions for the record. So if we continue to contract, these numbers will contract and they'll get more conservative, trust me. So I'm giving you a base scenario. It could deviate if we continue to contract overall. But if not, then that's what you'd be looking at. Probably 20-25% down. You can get a mezz piece as a second, which is effectively a second mortgage. They call it mezzanine financing. It'll come in second position. The rate will be higher if your first mortgage is, let's just say it's 4%. That mezz piece will be anywhere from 8 to 10%. The second, and then you'll typically have to come with 10%, 10 to 15% down to get the deal done. They normally want to see that amount of equity injected into the deal. The good thing about apartment buildings, and I've talked about this before, right now is nationwide. I don't want to say nationwide. A lot of major markets, the multifamily and the apartment buildings and the commercial stuff, the cap rates have been crap. So now the values are going to start to claw back down. That'll start to make the cap rates more attractive because the rent rates are going to move slower than the actual declines in the value. So you're going to be able to get much higher cap rates, which is going to get you into a property for cheaper, which effectively means the higher cap rate, the more cash you're putting in your pocket, net income on the particular project. So right now, apartment building cap rates are January, a lot of them were just trash. They were like a 5% cap, which is nothing. The only way you make money on 5% caps is by paying cash, because you're effectively getting a nominal return secured by secured by collateral on that. So you're just going to get the rents, and that's going to be your return if you pay expenses. If you're somebody that borrows and leverages cash, a 5% cap, you're making nothing. You're getting the tax write-off. So, the cap needs to be, you need to get a healthy cap. I mean, I can remember 6, 7, 8 years ago in Philly, we'd be able to get 9, 10 caps. I mean, which was beautiful, so I'm looking forward to getting back there. And especially down here in Southeast Florida, where there's a ton of multifamilies, you get the same way. So to answer the original question, I think, coming up could be a good opportunity because you're going to see, he said apartment buildings, but commercially speaking, there's going to be a lot of asset repricing on the commercial side just because of how much tenants are restructuring with their commercial landlords and all the other variables coming into the broader economic issue right now. So there'll definitely be some opportunities, in the next year. I would think that'll make them much more attractive, and if the values pull back like that, then you're going to see loan to values pull back. If I was saying it's 25% down, the banks could be taking a more conservative position of 30% down, just to give themselves more cushion on the equity. Which the mezz piece isn't going to move. The mezz piece may just beef up, so you may have to put the first lender may come with 65%. The second lender, the mezz piece may be like 15-20%. Which effectively means you're going to be paying higher interest on the mezz piece on a larger amount. So it's going to hurt your bottom line, but if you get it for a cheaper price, it's going to be more money in your pocket anyway. It'll net out.
And he's still going to have people living in there, so they'll be paying for that.
That's what I'm saying. It'll be a good situation. I do think that we were in such a frothy environment, asset price wise, that I think that real estate prices will start to come back. I was looking at stuff in Philly over the weekend. There's some multifamilies that have come down already 20%. I think I talked about this earlier. They were already overpriced, but you're starting to see them already start to come down. So,
John, you are seeing investor prices, correct?
No. I'm just looking. On the real deals, like the larger deals, there isn't wholesaling, right? Like it's a smaller 1, 2, 3s. Granted, there are people that try to wholesale larger apartment buildings, but there's not a lot of room there. Like in a lot of bigger deals, like multifamily apartment building deals, they do assumable financing. You know what that means? Okay. That means where they take the first mortgage, the mortgage that comes in on the property, they sell the property with that financing assumable because it ends up being difficult to re-am the property and things like that. It starts getting a little bit itchy, especially when the values stay flat like they have been. So, to answer your question, no, I'm just I always look at trends in real estate, just as a force of habit.
I'm seeing people here in Jersey, realtors in Bergen County, and they're posting on my Facebook, and they're posting saying, I'm getting $70,000 over asking price.
Yeah, you said this before, though,
and I saw it again today. Last week was like 30,000, 20,000 over. Yeah, today I saw something that says 70 over asking. I said, what are people doing?
Listen, here's what I can tell you. I even in the armpit of 2008, people were buying houses. I mean, people don't look into the financial aspect of it. I know that I get all the numbers, the real estate housing numbers, that I know every month, nationwide report, and they were horrific last month. They're going to be even more horrific this month. They'll start to claw out, but you're going to get to a point where, I mean, it's going to hit a wall because there's just not going to be as many buyers percolating the system and people looking to buy because of the unemployment, B, where their wage is going to land after. So, I mean, I respect the realtor trying to do their job. I was also talking to a realtor yesterday. He said they're working twice as hard to make a quote. They're basically working 12-hour days trying to do these virtual showings, right?
Yes.
And they take forever because you're doing it on the computer. And this is just what would normally take them 7 minutes. It's taking them 45 minutes each one, and it's burning their entire day. Before they know it, they get nothing done by the end of the day when they're doing showings. You don't even know if the person's interested. So I think for every one success story you're getting, which I think is great if that's what's happening, I can assure you that is not the norm right now.
A lot of people struggling. A lot of realtors struggling.
It's just not. It's the market. It's not about good, bad, or indifferent. The good realtors are having the same problem. It's just haven't come down quick enough yet to make it appetizing for a bottom fisher to come in, right? That has the ability to buy. So you're sitting in this kind of limbo point right now, which we are as a broader economy, which is that people just don't know. Are we good? I mean, I know where it's going to go inevitably, but it's just a slow crawl there, right? Inevitably, values will drop. I mean, just do the numbers. It's an economics thing. I mean, it boils down to a supply-demand issue, like it always does. When you take 2 to 3 buyers out of a 10-person buyer pool, that means less people, unless the other 7 or 8 people are going to overcompensate for the other 2 or 3 buyers that were there 3 months ago. Values inevitably going to go down because there's going to be more. The supply is going to stay the same. There's going to be less demand. That's how prices go up, and that's how prices go down. Now, the degree to which prices are going to go down is going to be obviously impacted by a lot of variables, depending on the market and how overpriced they were at any particular point in time, coupled with how's the economic situation in that particular area, right?
Yes.
I mean, if a particular area is harder hit by this particular pandemic, or we're over leveraged, or any number of things, you're going to see those areas get hit a lot worse. And it's all going to be relative. So, I mean, I think it's great that you have some realtors doing victory dances. They're probably ecstatic they even sold a property in this market, and they should be, because I think it's a difficult market to sell in. Yep. That is by far and away not the norm, man. I'm telling you.
Okay, so Dark Sentence says, what about that Asian kid that allegedly has a $2 million credit line? Is that true? I don't know that Asian kid.
Yeah, I don't know who we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know what we're talking about either. And then Andre Arnold also says, also, thanks, Gizzy and John, for everything you have done for my wife and I thus far with our credit repair.
It's our pleasure, Andre.
Our pleasure, Andre. Okay, that was our conversation with Shirzan. Thank you both. I appreciate it. No problem. Experian is the most hit when applying for credit cards. Hardly Equifax. Synchrony is notorious TransUnion puller. Miss Divine Brown said that. Okay, Travis. Oh, Travis Benjamin says, I was with Lexington Law, but we not removing anything on my credit report, and I was paying $100 a month. Travis, $99. The reason why we came out with the $99 do-yourself credit repair system is for people like you who want to go somewhere else and pay $99 a month. You might as well do it yourself. $99, do a credit card for credit repair system, and basically you're gonna get aggressive results. It's a system, so you have to follow it. But in the event you want us to do it, we could definitely help you out. And if you want to quote, just send me an email, GizzyCredit.com, and we'll send you. We're going to need your Experian credit monitoring in order to review your 3 bureaus and give you a quote for the service. Okay, Freddie, what up, Gizzy and John? Freddie, we're helping his mom. Gizzy, I need your help with my credit report. Travis, just write me your email or text me. You know my number. Text me your email address, 973-440-8661. I'll send you the how to start credit repair information. Okay, Kizzy, I am going to email you the video from within my Credit Karma and experience with my credit report, a little bit more backstory. No, this is Miss Divine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to why I did this. I would like you to share it with John. Okay. Andre Johnson, what is credit worthiness versus credit score for funding? Can you elaborate the difference for anyone needing clarity?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's a technical term.
Yeah, what is credit worthiness versus credit score for funding?
That sounds like something that somebody made up on a YouTube video. But I mean, I can tell you, there's no. I mean, credit worthiness sounds like an adjective. I haven't ever heard that used in a technical capacity to where it would hold its own specific designation or function. Obviously the credit report holds significance. That sounds like maybe somebody was trying to sell you something, figure out a way to confuse you. Because there's no banking term that's credit worthiness. I mean, credit worthiness is obviously a term, but that's like a subjective term, right? It's not a definitive term. So unfortunately, I can't answer because I don't think it's actually. I haven't ever seen all the years that I've been doing is like give it its own designation. So
I guess credit worthiness is.
No, but he's not asking. See, that's what I'm saying. It's not a subjective thing. He's saying that. Can you explain the difference as it applies to business funding or personal funding, whatever the case may be?
Credit for funding. Can you? Okay, so credit worthiness is if you.
Credit worthiness is just. I mean, you're saying your credit report and your credit worthiness. I mean, if we're talking about it just broadly and subjectively, I mean they're the same thing, right? Your credit
Correct.
report,
yes.
When your credit report is in line, and everything is clean and you're ready to go, you're credit worthy at that point, right? You're credit worthy. You're ready to get credit, as in your report's ready, you're ready, everything is in line, and you're ready to go get credit, right? I mean, now, if he's just asking a broad opinion on these terms and he's unfamiliar, then yeah, that would be the idea, right? If your credit report is clean, then that would be the time you'd be credit worthy to go get funding, right? There's no technical term for it though, as far as like the banks. That's just a subjective term. It's not like a technical term used like in jargon,
Yes.
To determine if somebody's eligible or ineligible.
Okay. And then Freddie says, yo, fellas, do you need to go through the builder's preferred lender first or own lender?
No, you can use your own lender. And if they tell you you have to use their lender, they're full of nonsense. They'll come back and say, well, if you push back and they say, oh, well, if you use our lender, we'll cut this, and that's probably how they'll get you. But no, they can't force you to do that. Nobody can force you to use a lender they want you to use. Just like they can't force you to use a title company that they want you to use. Right?
Freddie is in California. He's in California.
It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter anywhere.
Yes.
You can't do it anywhere. It's a conflict, right? When you're forcing somebody to use that lender, this happened in 08. This is why back in 08, 09, before the crash, this is one of the things they hammered down on. A lot of people got in trouble for this, is that what would happen was the builder would use the mortgage company. They get kickback from the mortgage company. They'd make you use the same title company to get kickbacks from the title company. That's why you see all these disclosures that get circulated in the early stages, because they have to get full disclosure now, and it can't just be assumed that they're going to pipe it through their own people, because they were getting money hand over fist over and above the real estate sale. They were making money they were getting kickbacks on the financing, they were kickbacks on the title. They can't force you to do that under any circumstance.
How about the appraiser, Jay? Remember when people were appraising?
My dad's an appraiser. The appraisers are totally post 2008. They're entirely independent. Even if I wanted to get my dad as an appraiser, they wouldn't let me do it. But you have to go through a third party management system when you're ordering an appraisal. So if you're with any loan now, so if you're a lender and you have an appraiser you like using, you don't get to control that anymore. Before you used to, right? And that was another one of the large issues in 2007, 2008. They were making numbers work, right? So again, like I said earlier, anytime there's a hole in banking, it gets closed and then it's shut. So now anytime you want to order an appraisal, and this was largely in part before too, but now it's just absolutely definitive. You have to order through a third-party management system, appraisal management system. They're all over. So effectively, the management system takes the order from the mortgage company, and they turn around and send it out to one of their stable of appraisers that that they pick for that particular property, but it has no affiliation, so there's a buffer in between, so it can't be manipulated. You understand what I mean?
Yes. There were people here.
Comes to true value.
There were people in Newark. The guy, the real estate investor, he would get a whole bunch of properties in like a block, and then he was effectively raising his own real estate prices because of the appraiser. Says that house sold for 350, then that other house sold for 365, then that other guy sold for crazy.
In any area that's gentrifying, meaning
no, but this was back in the day. This was 08, 09.
That's what I'm saying. When it was probably what area was it?
In South Newark, Central Newark. I assume
that was a developing area, correct?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right now it's gentrified, right? They got a Starbucks in downtown Newark.
In an area that's gentrifying, you can pull that off, right? Because you come in and you establish a value. That's how blocks work. I see in Philadelphia. I used to see it all the time because I was in a lot of these things.
And you're in Philly. You got it. Philly's pretty big. And you got your sections there that are very gentrified. I remember I went to the Wahlburgers around that area.
What, Fishtown?
Wahlburgers.
Northern Liberties. I mean, Philadelphia's awesome, but I mean, you figure as far as all the different personalities and different neighborhoods, there's a lot of different neighborhoods now, and but it all started back in 2006, 2007. Philadelphia, all those areas that are built up, Grad Hospital, Point Breeze, Northern Liberties, Fishtown, Kensington, New Kensington, all these areas that are now like real hipster kind of, cute personalities. They were very, 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 very bad shape. And I'm only bringing that up because of the fact that what you're describing is what I used to see in the early days when I was buying in these areas. You would see people go and snatch up 4 or 5 and start building blocks out, right? Yes. That's the only way you could get financing. It's the only way you could get financing on those properties. You have to do a bunch of them to establish a value on that block to help that value grow to other blocks, because when the blocks are done in chops like that, each block is next to the other. It helps to establish value on the next block,
Yes.
And it grows from there. That's why a full-on gentrification takes time. For Philly, it's talking 14, 15 years, and we're getting to a point of saturation. But at the same time, I mean, it took a long time. It takes time. That's why I always say to people, the stock market, and I say this every time on every one of our podcasts. I say stock market moves like a motorcycle. The real estate market moves like a aircraft carrier. It takes a long time to turn, but then when it turns in that direction. It points its bow in that direction, and that's the direction that it goes. And that's why I'm saying if we start seeing a retraction in prices, it's not a blip, right? It's not something that happens on a blip. Consumer sentiment starts to lower. You start to see values go down. People can't, they're stuck in their house. They can't sell, so they're obviously not looking to buy because they can't get out of their own house. You start seeing all these different variables come into play, which help to accelerate the contraction of pricing. So it's all stuff that more than likely will occur over the course of the next year.
Wow. Well, my people, we are at the 2-hour and 2-minute mark. We never know when it's going to end, but basically around 2 hours, this is when it ends. John is tired. John, I don't know if he drinks water at the same time. John, as you know, he's a germaphobe, but he's also a workaholic.
Listen, I'm far from germaphobe, but as a society, we're germaphobes now. We go out masked and gloves and hazmat suits.
Yo, every day I go with my mask. I go shopping. I go to ShopRite. My wife doesn't let me leave without anything on.
No, listen, I'm in the same.
But you're in Florida, aren't you? Like, you guys are opening now.
We're open. Everything's open, but that doesn't mean that people leave the house. I mean, it's still, the traction is slowly getting out there. You're slowly starting to see people come out. But again, we're just at the doorstep. We're just taking, like I said earlier, we're a society of germaphobes right now. We're just taking that first step outside the door, and nobody knows if they're comfortable out yet. They don't know how their side. I heard a story today, where somebody saw someone they hadn't seen in a while, and they went up and shook their hand, right? Yeah. And they were spazzing out when they got home that they were so stupid that they shook their hand. And I'm like, man, and they were spazzing out because they didn't know if this person caught the virus. And I'm like, man, if this is what it looks like in the future, or at least the near future till this vaccine comes, I mean, that's not that's not a positive thought for the economy, right? When people are still spazzing out. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are completely ignoring it, but there's also a significant faction of people that are taking it very serious. So if you take into consideration the unemployment rate plus the people that are unwilling to comfortably leave their house, I mean, it's going to be pressure, man. And I just think, like we always say, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but if you just prepare yourself, that's all.
Correct. Well, Freddie is asking again, if we use their preferred lender, what are the things we could ask for? Closing costs, extra amenities, competitive rates?
That would come. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. He's right. So that's what you would want to come back for. You want to say, all right, well, if I use your lender, you got to cover all the closing costs, some shit like that. To use my language. Because that way it gives you motivation to want to deal with them. Because look, sometimes they're getting something from the lender. Maybe they're not. It's irrelevant. A lot of times builders like to use lenders for a multitude of reasons. Sometimes because they get stuff done. Sometimes because they are affiliated somehow with the funding source. Any number of reasons, but whatever the case may be, you should definitely work it in your favor because they can't force you to do it. So it doesn't really matter.
Okay. All righty, Freddie. John, go ahead. Go drink some coffee. Oh, no, you're about to go to sleep in like 2 hours.
Yeah, right. 2 hours. I'm going to be asleep in like 45 minutes.
John, we are getting more popular on social media. As you can see, a lot more emails coming through. A lot of people starting credit repair. Just want to say we appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Greatly appreciate everybody.
We do these podcasts. I don't know if you want to just end it by saying something, Jay, about this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, we greatly appreciate everybody listening. We also greatly appreciate anybody decides they want to proceed with the service. But again, I say it's the end of every one. If for the people that are listening and they don't start, but they're using it for education, that's what we do this for. In all sincerity, we do it as a way to obviously educate people. It gives a little more transparency about us, what we know, the extent to which we know, which we feel as though differentiates us among other things from other companies that are doing things somewhat similar to what we're doing. Maybe not to the extent that we're doing it or helping the client to the extent that we do. But if there's people that that you think can be helped with the knowledge that we have in these podcasts, because that's one of the main focuses of doing these on the educational portion, just to obviously give people the opportunity to understand the rules of the game. Definitely send this over to them. Let them learn all the podcasts. Anyone that resonates with you, if you think it can help somebody, send it out because we're about spreading the knowledge. I mean, us giving knowledge and giving information on what goes on in this business is not in any way diluting the ability of us to be able to do our job. It's just allowing you to understand further what we're doing within our job, right? And how things are working and why things are doing this and why things are doing that. And it makes the process a lot easier. And more important, you should know this stuff anyway for when you try and get financing. And that goes for anybody. So whether you're a client of ours or not, and you know somebody that could use this advice, definitely let them listen. Definitely send this over and send the one that you think would apply to them over, because it's all the knowledge that we're giving isn't opinion, it's fact based on many, many years of doing this in all these different areas, whether it be real estate, stock market, the credit repair, all this stuff. It's stuff I do myself and I've been doing for a very long time in a very large quantity, in a very large volume. So I know this stuff. I'm not making it up. I'm not exaggerating. And I think most people probably know that by now, but I feel the need if somebody's just listening for the first time, this isn't opinion. It's just fact I'm providing. So definitely, if you know somebody that could use it, please send it over to them.
And they can also go back to the first podcast, which was December 26th, which was the day after Christmas, that we started doing podcasts on a weekly basis. Okay. We normally have this podcast on Monday, but I had technical difficulties yesterday. That's why we're doing it today, Tuesday. Thank you so much for the people logged on. John, thank you so much. And see you later. Take care. Bye-bye. Pues sí, mi gente, you already know. We work hard every day, 6 days a week. On Sundays, we take the day off to be with family. But even at that time, when it comes to the afternoon, we're sending emails out. John's a beast. Anyways, my people, gotcha, John. Great show, guys. I learned something. Tonight. No problem. S House, we're here for you. Remember, log on, share the content. I only see 16 likes. If you could like the video, that would definitely help us out tremendously. My people on Facebook who stood on, this is my people on Facebook. You guys have stood on with me. Thank you so much for the people who log on. I am doing these podcasts on Facebook on my personal page, but I got to transfer them over to my business page. So my people, you may like the business, my business page, because eventually everything is going to be done through my business page. Again, my people, you already know what time it is. Anybody know what time it is? It's time for GizzyCredit song. Okay? Thank you so much. See you next week. Email me. Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't be scared, cause then you'll regret it. Hey, hey. Thank you, my people. See you later. Oh. Anything you want, then you can get it. Don't be scared, but then you'll regret it. You no longer gotta look at that. Hey. Don't be scammed. What you need is just a change of plans. And time is money, you know, get that cash. So you follow me on Instagram at GizzyCredit. Social media. Bendiciones to all. Be safe. Wear your mask. See y'all later.